what psychedelics do. They're amplifiers. They amplify the power of music and sound and make you dissolve, disconnect you from the default mode network, the egoic mind. As the tryptamines, psilocybin, psilocin, the DMTs, create heightening of the auditory cortex, and we're connecting to the field that is all us.
My whole head started vibrating in that tonality.
Exactly.
It changed the state of my consciousness.
Reality has been driven by noise, static, eagerness, anxiety, fear, these unhealthy, we call them lower vibrational states. And that's why harmony is what will bring us back. God said, "Let there be light," how this language creates reality, and ancient biblical texts are encoded with the science of harmonics. Consonants and vowels are all waveforms. Love and harmony. It's a state of mind. It's an inner poise. It's an equilibrium. The force measure behind all religions. You keep following that and understanding the constructs around the physics of sound, acoustics, you get to God.
A healer is someone who can heal you. A master is someone who teaches you how to heal yourself. And a mystic is someone who reminds you you're already healed.
Real medicine is within us. We need something to get us to that. Music is not just an art form. It's a system for unraveling consciousness, because sound wants to wake us up. And this is a huge truth, but you need to know how to use it.
Alexandre Tannous is a multidisciplinary master who has dedicated his life to understanding the secret truth and geometry of both sound and creation. And he weaves these both together in an experience that is unlike anything I have ever experienced in my whole life. The tuning of our bodies to truth based on the actual natural harmonics of the universe is something that's had a profound impact on my life. And tapping into his body of wisdom will help clarify so many things, both in the resonant field of our bodies and our minds. So I can't wait to share this podcast with Alexandre Tannous.
Have you watched the film Arrival, the sci-fi? Remember their language?
Yeah.
That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
It's creating inner reality through sound, through the words and the musicality, so that people get something that you cannot name it, you cannot talk about, but to get their noses involved.
And that's what you are, really. You know, having spent a few days with you, you are somebody who is tuned to the frequency of truth. And what you say is precise. The way you move, the way you play music, the way you do everything is precisely tuned to truth to the best of your ability.
Thank you. And every person can do that. But discernment has to be there, intention, will, practice. And that's my message. I'm not anyone's healer.
Right. So the thing is one, I guess step one is commitment. Mm-hmm. You have to commit to the truth, right? Was there a point at which you made a distinct commitment where you said, like, all right, there's this distortion here. I could maybe give me an easier road. I could have some, false prizes, some pseudo pleasures with this distortion, but I'm going to choose truth.
Yeah.
All the way.
There has been moment, and this moment has been in a slow, extended crescendo since I was a kid, because based on how I grew up and what I was exposed to.
Yeah. And which is, for the audience who doesn't know, it's a lot of war.
Yeah, it's a lot of, exactly. So, and that's another message that I like to give to people, is that your suffering is a training. Go into it. Learn from the pain. It teaches us things that are indispensable. Pain, suffering. And of course, it's not the only way to learn. But when they happen, that's where the most important things are for us to learn. And to relabel things. In the West, we're not taught to do that. We're taught to end the suffering and wrap it up, or self-medicate and go to the doctor, go to the psychiatrist, take medication. And then you turn the suffering into business.
Yeah.
Profit over well-being, profit over consciousness. That's where we're at right now. And why this is happening is an interesting thing to discuss.
Well, suffering is a provision from God to give us the opportunity to grow from that experience.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and if as soon as you have that mindset, it's at the root of all Stoic philosophy. It's the root of samurai philosophy. It's the root of so many great philosophical traditions. They all point to the same thing: is it's a provision.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever obstacle you have, that's the way. Whatever challenge you have, that's a provision. Whatever difficulty you're going through, that's your opportunity. You know, and that is like the kind of a truth that crosses all different spectrums.
Exactly. Yes. That's what we're in the pursuit of.
Why is it that collectively we got so lost? Go back and tell us a story. Tell us a story of where we lost our way.
Yeah. The way I experienced life, the events I went through, the suffering, and we can talk about this later, and my journey of learning and being a student, learning from people, traveling, doing field work, being interested in so many interesting things in pursuit of the truth, and the way I've observed human beings behave and their capacity, the positive and the negative. I believe that we are a species with trauma and a species with amnesia. Because the way we behave from very pronounced reptilian brain that wants us to be safe, wants us to survive, and the way we focus on profit, and of course, there's amazing things happening in the world, and billions of people came to the human experience and did a wonderful thing, but something is odd that for us to arrive to this point where the more time goes by, the more rogue we go, and the more we kill each other for various reasons and oppose things and create tension and spend more money and energy in creating weapons, and instead of getting busy cleaning up Earth, the pollution, and stop species extinction and stop thinking about a different planet to move to, and this is home. And why are we destroying home? If you look around, no other intelligent species does that. We're at a point where a termite colony and ant colony exhibits more harmony than human beings. So what's going on? Nature doesn't create imperfect things. And there's a lot to learn from what's going on, I believe. We're going through suffering, again, to learn something. And we're not getting the message that there is something to learn. So the reptilian brain, I believe, is firing out. And this is something you see quite often, almost all the time, when people have been traumatized, is that they're always trying to fend for themselves, always trying, they're watchful and they're skeptical and they lack trust. So, and the evolution caused us to become so smart but wisdomless. And there's a lot of unfairness. There are wonderful things in the world, but there's a lot of unfairness on everywhere you look. I believe that it is very possible that this is a byproduct of huge trauma that must have happened years ago. It affected the human race in general. So if you study what is the most common story that is transmitted in all cultures that seem to have created a lot of chaos, a lot of destruction, a lot of death, annihilation, it's the big flood. Everywhere you go, there's the story of flood, including the Bible, Noah's flood. I personally don't believe it's an actual story, but it's a story to be transmitted so that this memory is alive. And now it's been confirmed that there was a flood. Mm-hmm. And we know that if you dig deep in the earth, in most places you arrive to a layer of discoloration called the Younger Dryas. That water came out of nowhere, huge quantity, and it froze. So this is something archaeologists know about. So this flood seemed to have happened about 12,800 years ago and lasted 1,200 years, so to 11,600 years ago. And the flood seemed to have killed most people, eradicated everything. Imagine losing everything that we know, everything that we have, and most people that we know die. So what happens in this case is that those who have survived are running from the reptilian brain that wants to keep us alive. And that's something we cannot resist. Fight or flight, freeze. And it's the core of the brain, the brain stem, the next layer up is the mammalian brain, the limbic system where feelings and emotions are. And the most important part that is related to logic, discernment, reasoning, the intellect, creativity is the neocortex. So there's a malfunction in the hardware, pardon me for using these words, but I'm doing that on purpose. That this hardware, the brain and its different parts, and of course there's the heart and there's the microbiome, but let's keep it here for now, has been impinging on the mammalian brain, debilitating it, and we don't see a red flag or a red light that, reptilian brain is interfering. It happens so smoothly and so naturally. And that's how we survive situations.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been happening quite a lot and debilitating people. And I'm going to give examples. So this flood seemed to have launched us in the reptilian brain behavior to survive. And this trauma did not last in one generation, many generations, 1,200 years. So I'll tell you later where I believe this water came from, if there was flood and torrential rain, etc. But this idea that we are being controlled by something from within us and there's no discernment, awareness to it. Look, for example, what happened during COVID. Some channel reported news, whatever, I don't watch TV, I don't have a cable box, reported people going to supermarkets and buying toilet paper. And we know that COVID causes many things, but not diarrhea. And started buying toilet paper. And that went viral, not only in that town, that state, in the United States, but everywhere in the world.
Toilet paper shortage.
Why would it? Well, so hive mind. People following others with no discernment, logic, and reasoning.
As soon as fear was present.
You don't think anymore. You just act. And that's what reptilian brain is. Even if it's something so silly, well, if we want to stuck on something, water and food would be more important, and but not toilet paper. So we do this quite a lot. We take actions and we don't even regret about them later, but there's constantly mismanaged energy, malinvested energy that we do. And we need to learn about the nature of good and evil. Where are they? Are they outside or inside? What are the processes that create what we call good and evil?
That's a big question. But just so, like, for people who are following here, what you're talking about is this like kind of post-diluvian, which means flood, post-diluvian traumatic injury collectively.
Exactly.
So like PDTI, post-diluvian traumatic injury.
Exactly.
That happened, which flipped us into our reptilian brain epigenetically through multiple generations. And every other consequent, action that was taken, let's say you're some Celtic druid out there, and then all of a sudden the Roman legion comes with fucking wolves and flaming arrows and they go to conquer you. Or let's say you're, a Jew in Germany in the 1940s, all of these, whatever, you can take a million stories, so many traumatic stories, all of these just further imprint this, tendency towards this kind of neurosis and fear and what's coming out to take me out next. Where is this going to go? And it self-perpetuates.
Yes, exactly.
From this, original place.
And we've been doing this individually and collectively, and it has become the new standard, the new way of doing things, but it's not being labeled as such. We know that there's something wrong, but I don't believe yet we understood what is the kernel, where this came from. This is my opinion, working a lot on myself. I grew up in 14 years of war in Beirut, Lebanon. I went through a lot of suffering, immense suffering and illnesses, and working with people, the work I do with people, helping them change their narrative. So the narrative here is so ingrained in us. And if this flood happened, then the epigenetic material is transmitted for generations. Now we know that epigenetic material is transmitted for 14 generations. Most likely it's far more than that, because this number has been increasing. As of 3-4 years ago, the number is 14 generations. So that means all of us have the good and the bad in a database of experience in our genes. Epigenetics, epi in Latin means above. And it can manifest if it's nurtured. So it's not nature or nurture, it's both at the same time. And we can tweak it out. We can tune it out and modify it based on our behavior so that we don't transmit it anymore to our children. But if this had happened for 1,200 years, that's a lot of imprinting on epigenetic level, and we're trying to heal from that. But we need to take certain attempt to understand it and use the tools that we have now and do many things to our science, bring spirituality back to science and bring science back to natural philosophy, where science came from, which is study nature to understand things you need to understand who you are, what nature is to us, and what God is, where God is, and so many other things. And that's what Sir Francis Bacon, the enlightened being who was a holder of mystery school, he's the one who created the scientific method. He did not know that we're going to take spirituality out of science, and that happened for specific reasons. And we threw away
or make science the new spirituality.
The new spirituality, yes. Rudolf Steiner talked about the importance of this spirit science. So this is something that's very important. When you do that, then the way we're perceiving things, because we change, because we've been going through misguided perception, unintended intentions, misspoken words, and we are running in an automated way. So the reptilian brain can do that when people are in a state of fear. There's no logic. They create a lot of noise. They're always watchful. And I lived through that for many years. I grew up in 14 years of wars. It started when I was 9, and we immigrated out of it. I was almost 23. So I know that very well. And I've been working on myself to not do this anymore, to heal my autonomic nervous system, to heal the trauma that. And what does trauma do? Many things, but we know that it creates inflammation in the body. The autonomic nervous system, it's out of balance. Sympathetic is no longer the sympathetic it needs to be, and parasympathetic is rarely there, not entirely, and this is how people lose sleep. So this on and off is malfunctioning, and that creates a rogue autonomic nervous system that attacks the host's own body parts and creates inflammation. That's the Achilles heel. We know that inflammation is what is debilitating the human race. If you don't treat it, you have a lot of opportunity to create businesses, by the way. People being out of tune. And so I lost 2 vital organs from severe case of ulcerative colitis. Different plumbing in my belly. Fortunately, they took small intestine, created pouch like that, replaces the rectum. So, and this was a fairly new operation. And so I know it from the inside out. These are not theories. I'm talking about how over the years I understood what my body was going through. And that drove me toward understand the insanity of human being and why does that, but with compassion and empathy and not taking sides.
So that was your health challenges were the force function to get you to change your consciousness radically.
Exactly.
I've experienced something similar, actually. That wasn't a health challenge, though, but it was, I've been getting more and more forced. I've created situations in my life where I'm getting more and more forced to where there's only one choice. And this crystallized in a sound meditation that you offered, which this sound meditation that you offered to, myself and Vailana and some of our family, it was so tuned to truth that there was no other room for any distortion. Everything that you did, and I want to talk about the way that you tune music to truth, and you tune and what we've done with music itself and the power of that. That's a whole big thing that we got to open up in this podcast. But to get to where my point was going, I'm a very sensitive being. It's my superpower, but it's also my kryptonite.
Yeah.
I feel everything a lot. And I'm becoming more and more sensitive, actually, as time goes on. As my heart opens more, I'm more and more sensitive to other people's energy. Where somebody, especially one of my beloveds, they shut down their energy, and it feels like I'm in a frozen, frigid tundra, like ice storm, right? Like it's like I feel it intensely. And so it's putting my own nervous system in this state of like constant, when's the next emotional storm that I'm going to have to weather? When's the next? And then there's other things that are going on that have complexity and disappointments and, friendship betrayals and different things that are happening. And it's come to the point where it's actually absolutely untenable for me to continue with the operating system that I had. And then I was listening to you play your music and also listening to the Sufi mystics, recordings of the Sufi mystics, crying their love for God in the pure form, masculine voices mostly, though the feminine voices were also very important, but the masculine voices crying their love for God in this purity, in Farsi, I think they were singing. And I realized like, aha, I get it. The safe place for your heart is with God. It's with God and truth. That's the only safe place for your heart. And to know that your heart is always connected to God. It will never leave. There's nothing that will sever that connection. The love is ever present and eternal. And yes, all of these people can love you, but they're all human. And every time we try to outsource our reflection of God to another person, that person is bound to let us down. If we put the God, the Father, into our dad's going to disappoint us and we're not going to believe in the Father anymore. If we put the belief in the mother, the divine feminine, into our mother or our partner, they're going to ultimately not be able to live up to the pure divinity. They're human. They're human. So are you, right? So like the safe place for my heart, there's no other safe place but to be completely devoting my heart to God.
Yeah.
That's the only way that I've found. And it's new. It's like a new thing. I've always had a connection to God, but it was like, no, you got to go all the way. And it was like kind of this born again moment, honestly, where it was like, this is the safe place. This is the safe harbor that I've been looking for my whole life. Because then no matter what happens, even all the existential risk stuff, yeah, of course, I want to do my best to, protect the world and myself and my family against suffering and pain. But also my heart's always with God in one way or another. Like it's all going to be okay.
Yeah. Trusting the process. Yes, absolutely. What you said is very important, complex, and it can take many days to take it apart. So, in my opinion, the God that we need to follow is inside of us.
Right.
It's not the God that we kill each other over whose method is more correct to worship, whether Jews, Christians, and Muslims, or even denominations within them, Protestant, Catholics, Orthodox, Sunni, Shiite, Alawite, and different factions within Judaism. That is not something that resonates with me, but the real God is connected to love and harmony. We'll come back to this later. But I am as well very sensitive, and that sensitivity, I understand you very well, can be a good thing and a bad thing. What we can do here to not misuse our sensitivity to open loopholes that others can manipulate us, and we lose personal sovereignty and dominion, self-protection, is a very complex process, and every person does it in a variety of different ways. Most of the time, they're inconspicuous, and even if you sit and discuss them with the person, would refute that and not always accept, unless they've really suffered and they're desperate and they're curious and they've done some work to listen and not say no very quickly, because there's cognitive dissonance, there's different brain wiring, there's so many things that would hold us back. So is to reconstruct to the optimal level of self-love. In self-love, there's self-worth, self-prioritization, self-care, and no more self-victimization, no more attachment and addiction. And that's problem number one. We have addictions. in not just the things we intake, alcohol and nicotine, sugar, junk food, or bad drugs. Our worst addictions are to emotional states: shame, guilt, anger, resentment, self-loathing, self-victimization, fear. And they plague us, especially when rumination, which is obsessive thought processes about something that most likely will not happen, but it's projected into the future. And that's something we do to create anxiety out of nothingness. We often do that. And even though we have precedents that we've done this 100 times in the past, and the chances of this thing that we focus on almost never happens, we don't register that we keep doing it. So where is our awareness? Where is the intelligence that such sophisticated species, human beings, why do we not notice this? Yet we do it. And then if we reflect on the past, then we're depressed. So we have these two things that we feed off of. So basically we spend time and energy in focusing on something that's not good for us. What can cure that? Well, awareness, discernment, really paying attention to even how paying attention has changed, has diminished. But the ultimate goal is to get to self-love. And the absence of self-love is the root cause of all of our issues, from what I'm noticing in myself and many of the people I work with, thousands of them.
During my 11-year tenure with Onnit, we created a lot of revolutionary formulas, none more revolutionary than our flagship Alpha Brain. It's a product that I take every single day, still to this day. And then after I sold Onnit in 2021, I came across a particular ingredient. It's a metabolite of caffeine, which means that it's something that the body naturally breaks caffeine down into. And it's called paraxanthine. And then I found that ingredient and I said, this is doing a lot of what I wish caffeine would do, but it's not having the negative effects that I experience with caffeine. It's making me feel more alive, more energized, more clear in my mind, but it's also not sending me down that caffeine roller coaster. And then I said, what if we surrounded this with the best natural ingredients to create a really revolutionary formula? And we did it. And so I created a new company called Correct with a K, housed on correct.life, called Correct Energy. And it's absolutely as much of a revolution as Alpha Brain ever was. Alpha Brain worked on the acetylcholine neurotransmitter designed to give you more focus, and this works on the dopamine pathway, which is really like the go mechanism for the body. So whether you're working out, working hard, writing, anything that you're doing, playing with your kids, Correct Energy is going to be an absolute revolution in how you're able to interact with life with the vim and vigor and passion that you know is truly you. One of the things about this product is it just feels like you have more of you available. It doesn't change who you are, it doesn't change your mindset, it just gives you more of the best of yourself. So if you're interested, check it out at correct.life. Do you think that one of the causes of this is, so let's say you're people living in the coastline somewhere and all of a sudden the flood comes and you're like, what the fuck, where did this come from? And there's a cognitive dissonance of like, this, I don't understand where this came from. So you can either be angry at this external force, but it seems like a natural thing that just happened. It just happened to you. So you try to make sense of it because we need to feel like there's a just cosmos, like there's a desire for coherence in our understanding of fairness and like this is right. And so we internalize it and say, it must have been my fault. I wasn't pious enough. I did something wrong. I didn't do this, you know?
Yeah, self-flagellation.
Self-flagellation. So it's my fault. And you see this in a lot of abusive patterns, even with parents and children or domestic partners, like somebody abuses somebody else and they say, it's my fault. And even if they know better, there's some part of you that thinks like, I'm bad, you know, and that's where shame comes. It's somehow I deserve this. And then you can start to hate yourself. And you turn all of that inward.
And it becomes a drama.
It becomes a drama.
Drama that's infinite and it goes into fractal-like and worse things can manifest and it's all a story.
Right.
That we're creating in the head. But it's based on misguided perception. malinvested energy and waste of time and energy. That's why a practice is important. That means every day I do something through which I express respect to my entire being on the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic levels. Whether sitting and meditating or doing yoga, or working with sound, doing breath work, going and working with other professionals to help supporting us so that we do our own healing. The language around it is not accurate. We need to fine-tune these things. We live in this reality partly, and this partly can go to great level and not just minimal level, is because we use the wrong language to describe things. So we've been navigating through reality by having the wrong narrative, the wrong story, the wrong labels. And humans, if they're traumatized, are not good at picking the most suitable words, expressions in a persnickety way to describe what's going on. We often choose a word. For example, in my humble opinion, healer doesn't heal people. It facilitates healing most of the time. There may be some tiny percentage of those who call themselves healer that have supernatural capacity, somehow came to this word unlocked, or they went through experiences and accidents sometimes and became unlocked. And we know many of these people. But most of the time, they facilitate healing, create the conditions for healing to happen. Safety, giving tools, giving technique, pushing, supporting, encouraging. And that's entrainment. So someone is entraining us to be positive again, the way music works with us.
There's a saying that this I just want to see if you resonate with this, that a healer is someone who can heal you, a master is someone who teaches you how to heal yourself, and a mystic is someone who reminds you you're already healed.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I fully agree with this. What is causing us to not own it, to not, religions tell us that we are fallen gods. We lost connection with the Godhead. What is holding? Well, the trauma, the separation of science and spirituality, the imbalance between inner and feminine within us. We can talk about this later. Disempowering the feminine in general, in nature, in women, in us, and focusing on the material world and on profit, because that gives us the illusion of safety. So energies, powers, and not only money, position of power, sexuality, all gold and all precious things are our obsession. Where did this come from? I think it's about the journey. It's about the journey of us suffering a lot. And every time we think that we can't suffer more, we're going to suffer more, and we're going to get addicted to it and perpetuate until we learn the lesson. And in the process, you're going to have many people who are going to die and a lot of destruction happening. But why? Because we're adaptable creatures. The learning won't happen unless we start to create a practice and stop acting. We need to be able to become the musician on stage and the conductor, the employee in the company and the supervisor, the manager, the actor and the director. That's self-awareness, which is zooming out, understanding our actions with equanimity. And that's very important word here to bring to our language, which means preserving a state of psychological stability without being influenced by inner or outer stimuli. But we do this all the time. We're always bringing the past in ribbons, and we experience reality through lenses and filters. We're not present, and we have expectation on what the future should be like. So we're not trusting the process that we came here to go through a journey and to learn something, many things that are very important. Chiefly, we reunite with God, understanding what God is, and finding it. And this is where we become easily sold different ideas of God as a way to simplify or as a way to help people, but then it turns into business and power is mishandled. So with discovery, with learning, with knowledge, with gifts comes great power. But if humans lack the discernment, the intention, the love, the compassion toward others, the respect, the attention, the presence of mind, we start to mishandle this power. And we lose the good handling of the responsibility. And that is what's plaguing the world as well. Mm-hmm. Is that people who are coming from a trauma and they got busy achieving, moving through life, next position up and higher position, more power, more money, bigger company.
All in this scramble to be more safe.
Yes. What they end up doing, and I work a lot with people like that, it's all caused by the narrative, is that they lose in the process as they gain more and more power. They lose self-love. They lose sense of safety, sense of joy, and inner peace. And that becomes okay. And the more they continue on that self-destructive behavior, self-sabotage taken to a whole other level, and their body starts to collapse. They don't sleep so well. They're not eating well. They're not exercising. They're not meditating. They're not taking vacation. This happens to so many people. And they don't know what to do but to go back on the hamster wheel and do what others are doing. So there's also encouragement. There's the following many people, masses. And there's a force that's perpetuating this. Why do we do that? What is the point of being alive? We lost so many things that the ancients respected and valued. Now, whenever we start to wake up, we start to bring in more of these ancient practices, but we don't do well on that either because we take them out of context and we imitate what the ancients are doing somewhere else, whether in the Amazon in Africa and Central Asia, and so we lack authenticity. There's desperateness, and there is eagerness and haste. But that's also noise. So we're trying to find how to shift the noise to signal ratio. And we don't always do a good job. Now, there's, of course, magical things and amazing things happening in the world, and humanity is waking up, and I like to focus on the positive. And I'm not one of these people who spread doom and gloom. I'm just acknowledging its existence, and I'm trying to understand what is this about without taking sides. And This is where humans go wrong, is that they always take sides. So we're perpetuating the suffering. I think it's time for us to zoom out and understand why these wars are happening, why these unfair things are happening, why humans are behaving rogue, what seems to be, in a multidisciplinary way, in a creative way, in paying attention and getting these leaders, these people in powerful position to stop working on their own healing and get back to self-love, get back to unite with the divine within us. Bring balance between feminine and masculine. So if people have gone through traumas and dissociate, and trauma is a very complex thing. Trauma is when we go, and I fully agree with you that we shouldn't call it post-traumatic stress disorder. I like to call it post-traumatic stress injury because it's more of an injury. There's more compassion and empathy other than, this thing is a disorder. Like, scientists, you just study people. You don't express emotions and love and care. So we need to understand what we do when we're traumatized. We have the memory of this thing that happened 20 years ago or 5 days ago, and we're holding on to it and trying to push it away. And we're complaining about its existence. We try to self-medicate and try to run and get people to help us from the outside. And there are many businesses around this, people who lack the integrity to just sell us stories or something taken out of its context, but we're not gaining back agency. Agency is what we lack. And that's what this trauma has caused, a lack of agency. And let me take apart agency, because it's important to take these words apart, because we're so good at saying the right words, but we don't follow with the right action, and words are cheap, as we know. Actions are real. Agency is our will, intention, attention, logic, discernment, reasoning, intuition, imagination, inspiration, presence of mind, and many more. But these are a few things, which is what we bring to any experience. This is what happens phenomenologically when we study the mechanics of an experience. Who's having the experience? Who's commenting on it? We always label things. Mm-hmm. So we start to label things in the wrong way when we are suffering from PTSI. And we don't work toward healing it because we're still doings. We're human doings, not human beings. We're always doing things. And that's the problem, is that we can no longer go to sleep because there's a lot of doing in the head. Well, yeah, thinking is important. I'm not saying, but how can this work with that in harmony, right hemisphere, left hemisphere? And how can this work with this? This is where alchemy is for me.
And you're pointing to your head and your heart for those listening to
audio. Yes, exactly. balance, harmony, which creates a different state of resonance. So let me go back to the hardware that I talked about and what I'm calling here the hardware. I know technology has negative connotations, but also has great things. Any powerful tool, we can do extreme good and extreme bad. But I'm doing this on purpose to get my message through. Let's pretend the body parts are hardware. The brain, the heart, the limbic system, and the different parts of the brain, and the guts, and the microbiome and mycobiome, and we're starting to, in the vagus nerve, and so many other things. It seems that if this hardware is working out of balance, our consciousness becomes different. Unlike a computer where you have the hardware and you have the software, the operating system. Well, yeah, the hardware has to be in good condition, but if the keyboard is malfunctioning, or the mouse or the trackball, or the LCD, the screen is malfunctioning, the operating system keeps on working very well. But not the same with the human body. Our consciousness seems to have to change if there's an imbalance between these body parts and how they're working together. If there is harmony, resonance, working together like very, very sophisticated set of cog wheels, most sophisticated computer machine, the brain, as my friend Dennis McKenna calls the brain, the 3-pound universe. This is what we need to focus on, is how is it wired? How this wiring, and as we know, the basic principle in neuroscience that neurons that fire together wire together. We're trying to change how the brain is wired because that's where reality is, and trying to bring balance to it. So it seems that if it's malfunctioning with a lot of interference from reptilian brain and not so much, the feelings and emotions, the limbic system has been traumatized, and people, because of trauma, can become Asperger-like and can even become sociopathic and psychopathic and can become high achiever, but with the undertones of self-destructive behavior in the long run.
Well, I mean, this is the other strategy, right? So I talked about the strategy. If you're feeling a lot, what is the safe harbor?
Yeah.
To put, and so the mind, I think, tilts towards one or two different directions. I think the neurotic is someone who's constantly feeling and aware of all of the dangers and the pressures and the different things. One thing that's important is getting your physical body, your animal, what I call the athlete, comfortable with pain.
Yeah.
And so intentionally going and doing hard things, cold, heat, sweat lodge, ice bath.
Challenging it,
and just showing that it's going to be okay.
Yes.
You can make it through.
Exactly.
This pain is going to be okay. Like, you don't need to fear the pain. So there's an aspect of that that's like a very kind of young, like, train your body to be able to withstand discomfort. Because pain is something that's like the first fear. And then there's the emotional pain, and then there's all of these things. And again, my solution, the only thing that made sense to me was fundamentally for my heart to stay open, which is my goal. How do I have a fully open heart? Is to give my heart to God. And so that was one choice. Other choice is armor up and don't feel anything. Become like a computer.
Yeah.
Like a computer isn't, screaming in pain if you start to untangle the wires inside or unplug it from the wall.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm off. Like, I'm no longer online. No big deal. I don't feel the pain. I don't have this self-awareness and this fear of death. So humans can make that choice to become like homo armor, which is something my teacher Rebbe Gaffney says, homo armor, where they're just completely armored up and they're just a cognitive processing machine that doesn't feel anything.
Yeah.
But if you're not feeling anything, then at that point, your decision-making process is all off, and it can become quite dangerous.
Yes.
To not feel anything.
And we create a different reality. The inner world then becomes projected onto the outer world. And if the person's in tune or out of tune, people around this person are going to feel that. We don't need to discuss that. And that's something we need to understand, that reality is not what it seems to be. And quantum physics, spirituality, and shamanism, psychedelic research, all of these things have been affirming these things, but easier said than done. Is that how can we gain a great level of self-awareness and come back to love, kindness, the positive aspect of the feminine: compassion, empathy, imagination, inspiration, intuition, to help save us and save the planet and save the species, and address things in a way expressing that we deserve. So I remember in the sound meditation in the beginning, I did the breath work, and I asked all of you to hold the breath to a certain extent. I was counting. And when people hold their breath, and anyone can experience this if they just take a few deep breaths in and out, and then hold the breath and see how much they can hold. This varies from one person to another, but as soon as it starts to get to 30 seconds, 40 seconds, some people a little more than that, there's an impulse that comes like, you got to breathe. We need to breathe. This is enough. This is the most I can do. And if the person gains more equanimity and bring presence to the mind and discernment and feel, let's be skeptical a little bit. Is it really time to breathe in now? Can I hold it a little longer? Let's see what happens. And if one holds another 10 or 20 seconds, and the person starts to feel choked up, no, I'm going to die. And then if you keep on holding and holding, you realize, whoa, I can go for another minute. And I can push back this reptilian brain impulse, scream, or desire, or need to want to make you breathe. It rushes to the rescue too quickly. And that is what happens with people. They become irritable, jumpy, hasty, eager, or so fearful, and they imagine something, and next thing it's real in their head, and it's definite that's going to happen, but it doesn't happen.
Right.
This is the impulse that we need to treat. This is the interference of the reptilian brain that every person has, and you can become entrained by others to do it more. So let me take apart the word entrainment, because I want everyone listening, watching to really understand it, in case if they don't. Entrainment is how our body is being affected by any condition. Music in a film affects the way we are watching the film. The cinematography, the script, and other elements, the lighting, etc. Music in a holy house, synagogue, church, mosque, elevates you, takes you inwards. Of course, it's suitable to do that. It's not just any music. If you smell incense, church, cathedral, Hindu temple, or Palo Santo and ayahuasca experience, all of it, and music in stores created, and in commercial, created in a suitable way to affect the prototype client that would be interested in buying that Mercedes or children toy. Obviously, the music going to be different to grab that person. If you go to teenage clothing store, the music going to be different than if you go to Macy's or Neiman Marcus or whatever is being sold there. So that's entrainment. The most powerful tool for entrainment is the auditory and the olfactory. Visual is very, advertisements rely heavily on that. Even if you glance at it for 1 second, it entrained you. It works. And that's why there are commercials and advertisements. So we entrain each other all the time. If you're driving in a very busy city, I live in New York and I have a car. And if I go into my car calm and start to drive, and I'm in Midtown now, and there's so much traffic and people cutting you off, and people who are affected by what happened earlier in the day or 2 days ago, and this busyness, and I got to get to my appointment. And New York are known to be very impatient and always rushing from one place to another without really need to be rushed this much. But we become intoxicated by these chemicals, neurotransmitters that our bodies secrete, and speed-like substances. And all of a sudden, you feel that you are behaving like them. You're starting to if one is not careful, we can quickly become entrained. And then I catch myself, whoa, I'm losing my temper, I'm losing here, because I start to take it personally. Well, there's an aspect in us that wants to go there. What is that aspect? How can we become negatively entrained so easily? And the media does that and make a living out of it. They perfected the art of how to breaking news, release it and bring it on. The music and the camera moves and breaking news. And What happens then if you're watching TV and there's breaking news coming? You're not going to turn it off or change the channel or put it on mute.
That's why they say if it bleeds, it leads.
Yes.
That thing that's the scariest thing. Let's start with that first, and then we'll get people afraid, and then their fear will give
and the
give
ratings
us their
go high,
attention.
and they make more money.
Yeah.
But by doing that, they're creating a reality and ensuring a lot of people are watching it.
Yeah.
So what is that? Well, it's a hook that gets your reptilian brain engaged. And without thinking about it, we watch the news. And if things are dire in the world, like around 9/11 and COVID, people would sit and watch the same thing being talked about over and over and over for 5, 6, 7 hours, even an entire day. Why? Something in them wants them to be informed to survive, and that's the reptilian brain.
And so, we saw that happen, and it created a phenomenon that some psychologists would call like a mass formation, where everybody was thinking in the same way. And so you have this free-floating anxiety, and then this anxiety spreads, and there's this fear. Oh, there's this new virus. Oh my God, it's going to kill us all. Oh, and then you get this mass formation of fear, and then there's all of this free-floating anxiety, and then you don't know what to do with it, so they point it at a target and say, aha, I know who the problem is. The problem is the unvaxxed, these domestic terrorists. And then the other people are like, the problem is the deep state. The problem is, but we create these scapegoats. And we've done this throughout time and that's actually where this scapegoat idea comes from. Yes. There was a goat that was sacrificially slaughtered that would be like, we're going to put all the evil that exists, everything, all of the pain, and we're going to sacrifice this goat and everybody will be okay. But this is the public lynchings and the public executions and all of this and the persecutions of different ethnicities and the genocides and all of this is because it's like we're going to take all of this free-floating anxiety, all of this trauma, all of this, we're going to project it onto another. And if we eradicate the other, everything will be good.
Yeah.
But it never works because then it's not actually the source. You're just placing it on something. It might work temporarily as a salve, but then you'll eventually need another scapegoat and another scapegoat, and you'll keep looking deeper and deeper and deeper until your whole society eats itself alive.
Exactly. Yes. And this can be some form of magic, but it's very complex. It can be done in a way that is more fine-tuned, in a way that works, and that's what happens in rituals. But it could be done in a cheap way where there is benefit to the person and does not change things, but it gives way to misinformation and disinformation and so many things, which is dividing the culture, dividing people, and getting people to become subjected to whatever they're interested in, whatever they see as the culprit could be influenced and trained by the outside or the inside. And then these groups start to coagulate together and they become movements and think. And you can play people, a hive mind, if the establishment knows what's going on. And that has been done. So that's a way of creating reality. This is something that has been happening for quite a long time. And we had many different groups doing it. First, those who had power, so the aristocracy, the nobility, the royalties created the laws because they had power. And the commoners followed through. And then religions came and realized that, you can create different reality. And it can be really powerful because it's about God. It's about salvation. It's about you realizing, I'm doing good. I'm not, I'm being a man of God, as they say, even if they kill the name of God.
Yeah, sure.
So it's pretty messed up. And then political systems and governments came and did the same thing. Of course, all of these things have done good, and I'm not saying they never do good, but there's that tendency that drive us toward benefiting and mishandling the power, mishandling the responsibility, and then empowering a very specific group to gain hegemony and control. We need to stop doing that and it has to start with finding why do we do that? Because now we're doing it on a mass media level and social media level, which these things can be used in a positive way. We don't do that. And now we're collecting data points on people to sell them all the things that they don't need and end up by working very hard to spend money on buying the things, so dopamine axis. We're hacking their consciousness. Through the dopamine axis, which the reward chemical, and we shouldn't forget that we run on chemicals in 3 categories. Neurotransmitters, so serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, norepinephrine, all these things. Enzymes and hormones. And of course, the body runs on electricity, very tiny part. So we're hacking the entire set of hardware, and we're creating a different consciousness. And now, as we have more and more people who are swearing they're going to find the solution, others are completely opposed to them and not even giving them a chance. And there's a lot of friendly fire and breaking each other's legs. And that has become a practice. And Silicon Valley is the one that is doing this impact on reality in a positive and negative way more than anyone else. So while royalties and nobilities are no longer acting as a major force, some people think that the Habsburgs are still in the background and manipulating things. Some people think this group and that group. But we're not going to go there now. Let's stay with religions, media, and Silicon Valley, because these are happening for real. And we need to figure out how can these people stop investing energy, time, and money, resources into things that have proven not to do good to anyone on earth and anything, and use our intellect with wisdom. What is the solution? Self-work, inner work, spirituality, inner child work. We should not demonize so much the Hitlers of the world and the Stalins and the Gaddafis and the Assad and all these dictators, but to understand, how do we become like that? How do people start with good intention, like all gurus, like all cults, and then we derail? What is causing us to derail? With compassion, empathy, with creativity, because even our creativity is being misused. You were talking about earlier, this person started to imagine things that are not happening, so they're being creative, but they're creating more anxiety. So we start to use this agency that we have in a negative way and spiral down, and there's no limit. And these ideas become so real that the person often resorts to committing suicide to stop the voices. Where do these voices come from? I'd like to mention a great book that I read recently that changed dramatically or affirmed things as well and changed further my understanding. Jerry Marzinski's book is, the book is called An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, The Fall of the Ivory Tower. He's someone who specialized as a psychiatrist in abnormal psychology and worked for over 40 years with people in rehab centers and jails and in mental institutions, and these people talking about voices in their head, voices that we all have. The negativity, the rumination around negativity, the negative entertainment about perceiving something and take it apart, milking the idea. We could go for several minutes and a long time. And we find that our capacity, our agency, for some reason is interested in playing the scenario in our head, and the scenario is not good. And again, as I said earlier, most likely it'll never happen. Why do we do that? Where is that coming from? We need to understand the nature of these voices and bring in spirituality to understand what's going on, or this concept of parasitic forces that plague our mind. That you find them in so many ancient cultures. In Gnosticism, it's been called the archons. It comes from ancient Greek, archonic forces. The archon means the ruler. Gurdjieff called it the evil magician. In North America, the natives called it Wetiko. And the concept of Satan, the adversary in Kabbalah, Shaitan in Sufism, the jinn in the Arab world and Middle East. I think this is real. I think that we need to look into and learn, be open at least to, we don't know what we don't know. And start to observe that in the self. In contemplation, in meditation, in any spiritual work with psychedelics, also to figure out who's having these thoughts. Who am I? As they tell you in the Vedanta schools in Hinduism, that the ultimate question, the most important one that anyone can ask is, who am I? What am I? Tat Tvam Asi is the answer to that in Sanskrit, which means you're all of that. So
and
I spend a lot of time on this.
I've really, this is the subject of my, my next book, which feels like the opus that I'm working on, and it's taking forever, and it'll continue to take forever, but it's
Yes.
called You versus Anti-You, and I take the aggregate names of all of these different forces that you mentioned, and I personalize it as both wildly personal and completely universal, the anti-You force, this force. And when I really track its roots, I start to see that ultimately, if all is God, which is what I believe, that's the God that I know, the God that infuses everything.
Yeah.
There's also a force that's created that says, I am separate from God, which allows us to have a separate experience and then interact with other forces. But that's fundamentally the first distortion and the first delusion. But it's a necessary one to create this reality that we're in. But that lie, so they say, Satan is the father of lies, they say, and I think that points to something, because it starts with the first delusion that I am separate from everybody else. Ego, I am, but really what ego means is I am not you. I am something else. And in the Aboriginal culture, they say nang nang, and they only say that. That's what they say when they're like ready to fight somebody. But otherwise, their pronoun is us too, because they're recognizing the collective space that you're sharing with all other people. But this force, I think, that isolates the self, isolated from the field, what I call the field, is, I think, really where a lot of these anti-You voices, these dark forces, that's the opening that kind of creates them, and then can start to plague the mind. One, it can start to destroy and deteriorate yourself, or it could try to inflate yourself, which is another way of destroying the self. And that's what I saw happen to my father. He was not able to source the adequate self-love, so he found a voice, this dark voice inside that inflated him and told him all of the things to make him, the next messiah, the next whatever else it might be, and he died isolated alone in his madness and psychosis. So this, one of the reasons why I'm writing this book, is it's a story of, all right, like I need to go deep into this force to understand it. It took my father's life, and I'm the son, and I'm here to appropriately avenge my father's death. But the death was his own voice, and it's the own voice that we all have inside. It was his personal anti-You. Like the anti-You is both personal, completely personal, and absolutely universal. So finding it within ourselves. So I've had to find it in myself.
Yeah.
And helping people to find it, so that we can actually then see the benefit of it, because actually it serves a purpose. Because once you're able to see it, it can drive, like suffering itself. It drives the evolution of our consciousness. It drives our growth. It becomes the worthy opponent, the adversary, Hasatan, the adversary that actually allows us, you say, thank you. Thank you for this contest. Now I'm going to step into a greater level of resonance and consciousness.
Yes. Beautiful. Well, in this case, it's important for us as humans, so what you've gone to do the narrative therapy, which is what I promote to people, to remind them to see that your dad came to suffer and to leave a trace in you, so that you help others with the way he suffered.
Yes.
But that has to be recontextualized, and to understand that, maybe I'm sure it was very traumatic for you to see him isolating himself, and it marked you forever. But you created the alchemy here. You are bringing this negative energy, let's call it, far more than energy, and emotions and emotional states and so on and so forth, and ideas, to transmute this negative energy into a positive one and bring learning out of it to yourself and others. And that voice is serious. And we need to follow that voice, but it has to be in tune. It has to be in line with Christ consciousness, with the Logos, with the likeness of God within us. God as harmony, God as love, cosmic magnitude of love. And I've had mystical experiences. I'm talking from real experiences and not confabulating. But there's also learning, even if the person died because of that voice.
Right.
Is that how can we trust that voice and take it to places of beauty, of learning, and not further separation.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely he did that because of things in his subconscious mind, things he needed to heal from, and darkness that was not addressed because we're not given these tools by our parents most of the time.
Sure.
Now we're starting to learn about him in the past. I mean, this has been happening for quite a long time, but now it has increased immensely. So many people now are into yoga and meditation, spirituality, and shamanism, and psychedelics, and breath work, and eating better. So we're learning to fine-tune this generational trauma in our epigenetics so that eventually this crescendo is going to be an accelerando as well, slow speeding up, and we become different species, and our behavior would change. But we need to create a dialogue around it and a discussion to see that people come and die and leave something behind. It's up to us to contextualize it properly or improperly. And I think this was a beautiful gift from your dad.
You know, I was in a darkness retreat in 2020, and my dad was still alive, but in the depth of his psychosis. It's been years since we've had contact. You know, I would send him an email every year on his birthday and Christmas and, you know, different things, but he would never respond to me. But he appeared to me in the darkness. So in the darkness retreat, you know, it triggers this endogenous DMT release. So I had a vision there, and my father was reading. He was right there in the corner of the room. Of course, the room's completely black. So this is a vision. Open-eyed, closed-eyed, doesn't matter because everything's black anyways. And he's there reading a book. And I say to him, Dad, what are you reading? And he says, The Book of Lies. I said, why are you reading that book, Dad? And he looks back up to me and he says, well, because I never thought I was enough. I never thought I was worthy of love. So I had to read the Book of Lies to tell me that I was worthy so I could love myself. And he closes the book and throws it over his shoulder and says, son, know that you're always worthy of love, no matter what you do, no matter what happens. You're always worthy of love, and you'll never have to read the Book of Lies. And I was like, I love you, Dad.
That's
it was a profound, profound moment. And it points exactly to what you're saying, is that he reached for these voices. The voices found their opening because he had linked his own self-love to his performance. And when he was no longer able to perform, you know, he was a famous, you know, pioneer in commodities trading, but then computers came along and outpaced his own ability to use his one mind against, you know, other minds. He had a competitive edge, but in the computer world, he didn't adapt to be able to meld his minds with computer and big information. So he lost his edge, and so he was losing. So his performance, his love was linked to performance. When his performance dropped, his self-love dropped to such a critical level that ultimately he was reaching for something that would give him a new level and a reason to love himself, because the self-love wasn't a priori. It wasn't before antecedent causality, before everything. You know, it was something that was externally validated. And that was the core of his psychosis. And of course, the medical world would just want to say, oh, he was, you know, paranoid schizophrenic. And
give him medication.
This is just the thing. But yes, it was that, but it was something much more mythological and something much more like psychological, not pathological.
Yes. Beautiful analysis. Yes, I'm really happy that you learned this lesson. It's, so he was no longer tapped into the dopamine axis that a lot of people become high achievers and they build huge companies because they get into achieving, but what they want is to show mom and dad that I'm worthy of love. Am I doing good? Am I good? Do you like me better now? And to feel good about themselves. And in the process, they create huge things. I'm not going to name names about some people who are alive and impactful, who have gone through this, but are they operating in a state of total harmony, or is there dissonance there? Have they done a lot of work on themselves to shift the noise to signal ratio where they're doing only good and not sacrificing themselves? and to realize that this emptiness that he suffered from, because now there are computers and he's no longer the king of trading commodities, and self-worth plummeted. And he went into psychosis because that inner voice that was guiding him turned into something else. What is lacking here is self-worth and self-love. That's what I mean by the absence of self-love is the root cause of all of our... And then what we start to do is self-medicate with drugs, with things that are not good for us. And we don't address these things the way we're supposed to, as good as rehab centers want to do, but they're still businesses. Just like hospitals and prisons. So
they want to rehab you just enough that you get enough of a benefit, but you come back, repeat customer.
Repeat customer, milking cows. Same with pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceuticals can save lives and can do wonders, but are they really healing people in the most efficient way? If a pharmaceutical company spends several years on drug discovery and many millions of dollars, it can go up to a couple of $100 million. Obviously, this pharmaceutical company is not going to create a drug that's going to heal people in 1 month-long prescription or year-long prescription for them to get return on the money invested in that. They need a lot of milking cows. And we have wonderful things happening in Western science and Western medical science and medical field. Pharmaceuticals need some tweaking because healing kills business at the end.
Right.
How can we become more humane and not worry about being very safe in the future? Because to some people, $2 million in a bank account is not enough. $1 billion is not enough. This reptilian brain becomes a hungry ghost.
I know this firsthand. You know, like I sold my business that I started from scratch. I scratched together $110,000 from two, dear friends, and scratched that together and started this business. Was at the very end of that amount of money, and then formed a partnership with Joe Rogan, started the company on it, ran it for 10 years, sold it. And I had little pieces of money and, some salary and some things that were coming in. So I was okay, but I wasn't like wealthy. I was just, money was in, money was coming out, always like in and out, in and out, in and out. I was always looking to know like what the next, disbursement would be that would cover this next thing. And so I was in this kind of constant state of scarcity. Then all of a sudden, wham, this huge lump sum of money comes into my bank account. And you would think at that point, I would be like, I'm safe. I have plenty of money. But it didn't happen. And
it didn't last long.
it never happened at all. That's the fucking crazy part. Is like, I still couldn't shut off the reptilian scarcity brain. And so I made decisions still based on scarcity. I got to put this money here and invest it in all of these things. And I was in such a hurry to do this thing because, now I don't have a business anymore. So I don't have a salary. So money's going to run out. So now I got to create. And I was looking at myself and I'm going like, what is going on? And now I can look back and just see, I never took the time to turn off that reptilian brain and actually take a moment to pause and be like, okay, I'm good. I'm safe. Let me put this in places and let me create a lifestyle where I'm safe. But instead, I created another situation where I would get into a state of frenetic energy to create more. And I look back now and be like, whoa, like that was an interesting trip that I took.
It is a trip. And that's what drives reality. That's what feeds the Maya, the state of infatuation with the material world. Fractals.
Yeah.
One thing leading to another. And you have billions and trillions of different variations and infinite number of different realities. How do we navigate through that? Where is true north? What is the thing that we need to follow? Well, we think it's God, but what God? What are we calling God? Where is that God? The male white dude we worship, we call Jehovah? I don't think so. If you read the Bible, there are a lot of iffy things that this God has done. So we've been entrained by that, and we're not waking up to this is not love, and we know that God should be love, omnipresent, omniscient, and powerful, but in a non-egotistical way, and wants self-worship and envious and jealous, bipolar, schizophrenic, promotes killing, promotes divide. It's a trickster God. And if it's happening for us to learn a lesson. And of course, I'm not criticizing religious people. I know they come from a good intention, whether they're Christian, Muslim, and Jews, and whether they're devout, Sunnite or Shiite, and I don't promote at all this divide, but I'm trying to bring in a healthy level of skepticism to understand why we kill each other, why we misbehave as a very intelligent species. And of course, we do that on the racial level, ideological level, and look at the tension happening between Democrats and Republicans. I'm not interested in politics. I'm interested enough to understand the human condition. I'm not interested in taking sides. I just care about not living in time and not seeing this being done and no one is talking about it. We need to bring this narrative in a compassionate way with concern, because we're at a very critical point right now. And we need to play it well. We need to change. We don't have the time to go back and figure out who was wrong, who's right. That's not about that. It's about what has been going all along and being overlooked and not being named. That we're only perpetuating different versions of inconvenient and unhealthy realities that we're creating. The other is not to blame. We're all creating that. How can we not do that? The answer to that is love and harmony. And God embodies this. Every experience that I had deep inside of me with divine energy, with cosmic magnitude of love, embodied love and harmony. It's a state of mind. It's an inner poise. It's an equilibrium. It's ethos and pathos. And that's why I resorted to focusing. I came to sound research and sound practice, sound therapy from music. I studied music extensively. I did 4 degrees in music over 12 years, studied different aspects of music theory, composition, music education, ethnomusicology, conducting. That eventually led me to researching where does this power that music has come from? And it's in sound, the harmonic series. We can talk about this later if you like, because this seems to be the most powerful tool or technology. I like to call them technologies, not medicine. Medicine for us Westerners embodies a passive participation. I'm interested in active participation. What is that? Well, psychedelics, sound, any tool we use that changes our consciousness is more of a technology, of a tool. We don't have the perfect word for it, supplement, an agent, but the real medicine is within us. We need something to get us to that. Because for us Westerners, medicine is like, if you have heartburn, take omeprazole, and that fixes it. If you have headache, take Advil, and we have a whole line of different products. And don't change anything in your schedule, just pop these pills and the headache is gone, because it's addressing symptoms and not causes.
And then we have 60% of people with some kind of chronic disease.
Yes.
And here we are.
A lot of milking cows.
The one tool that you've gone incredibly deep with, you've gone incredibly deep with many different tools, consciousness technologies of all sorts, including the right ideas, the right understandings, the cleaning of words, which I think is a very important process, which to clean the words to mean actually what they're intending to mean. So it's not to diminish any of these other aspects of this multifaceted project that you're on. But music is a particular expertise where you have a particularly unique, kind of sight that I haven't heard anybody else really talk about. And I was able to experience the profundity of actual harmony in music and how that can tune us to truth based on the natural law and the mathematics that were actually contained within the music that you were offering. And so I want to talk about that and where we've gone wrong with music and why that has ripple effects, because music has the power to actually tune us back, tune our own instrument back to truth.
Yeah.
And then allow the distortion to actually, the distortion can't hold, in truth, a lie cannot be held. In love, fear cannot be held.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you actually tune the instrument back to the right frequency, then all of these other things start to fall away. And music seems to be one of the most potent tools to be able to do that.
Yes. Well, thank you for recognizing this. And I got here by being a student and working hard and being curious and open and working incessantly. And so music seems to be the most indispensable art. If you look and see what humans have done everywhere in the world, in the past, in the present, they highly rely on the presence of music in different contexts. And that's something I study deeply as an ethnomusicologist. For those listening, watching, don't know what ethnomusicology is, it's a field in music that studies music as a sociocultural phenomenon, and the ultimate goal is to understand human beings by studying culture through music. It's kind of like anthropology of music. So you study why people are into this band or this artist. How does this band's music impact the community around that? There are various aspects, the behavior, also the economical, and we see that we use music everywhere all the time in religious experiences in 3 book religions. And the music changes whether you are in the Catholic Church, Protestant Church, Greek Orthodox Church. They use it to a whole other level. Byzantine chants are very, very complex chants, and the music is enormously complex. Talk about that later. In Eastern philosophies, in Hindu temples, chants, prayers, the sutra system that can be sung as well sometimes, and people using music in parties and festivals, in films, commercials, in sports games, in weddings, funerals in some cases, and various functions and events and award-giving ceremonies, and everywhere all the time. So Music is a company that started recording instrumentals to be played in elevators and in places where people work, companies and hospitals sometimes. And there's a field called music therapy that people may not know about it. And now sound, working with sound, unfortunately, it's called terms I don't believe they're just and empowering to the individual to use. Sound healing and sound bath. I like to call it sound therapy, sound meditation. It's not a term that I coined. It's been around, but I found it to be suitable because it communicates truth or something poignant in just 2 words. And we don't always pick the words to describe that, to create that reality. Because words create reality. We'll come back to the esoteric side of sound later in music. So the fact that human beings use music everywhere all the time means it's very important, and they're following intuitive intelligence. And that's the best lab. If you want to notice what's important for people, observe them, especially if they're not impacted by some authority, some establishment that's guiding them. Here, do this, do that. This. TV did that. Radio. Not only that, did a lot of great things on educational level, of course. So, and that's something as a musician, composer, conductor, academic, I was deeply interested in. And the more I studied about music, the more I realized, whoa, there's a lot more fascinating things. And my intention was to do undergrad like most people, maybe a master's, but ended up by staying at the university for 12 years, doing 4 degrees, and I just couldn't stop. And I taught at the university as well. And then I left and stopped doing what I was doing, being a professional musician, composer, conductor, and ethnomusicologist, teaching music in different contexts in New York City and traveling quite a lot, to focus on what is this about? What else can we do with music? Where does this power come from? How can we use it in a more meaningful way? How have others in the world have used it, and to do what? What do they use to talk about it? What do they think is going on? And that became my life's work. 25 years ago, started becoming interested in the power of sound, the Harmonics series, the place where harmony comes from. I'll talk about that later. And its intersection with consciousness, spirituality, inner capacity we have within us, divinity, psychedelic research, shamanism, because sound music, when I say sound, that encompasses music and words, of course, and vocalese, non-verbal singing. Why do we do all of that? What is there about to learn? And as I got also deep into the esoteric side of music, which is where they mentioned, I'll talk a bit about it later. All of these things, by the way, are not just cans of worms, they're buckets of worms and barrels of worms. So we can spend an entire week taking them apart. So I'm going to be succinct in certain areas, but people should research these things because there's a lot to know. My website is a good place for that because I put a lot of useful content that empowers people. I don't water down things, but I explain things, spend so much energy in transmitting something so important because everybody loves music. Not everybody practices and is interested in other arts, painting, drawing, and sculpture. Not everybody goes to dance performances, poetry readings, and music is so accessible, indispensable. So that's what I wanted to understand, human behavior. Where is this going to lead us to? And the more I became exposed to the esoteric side of music, the more I realized that, whoa, it takes you to God. And most book religions start with the idea that sound is God. Sound creates reality. In the Old Testament, you have Genesis. And in Genesis, you have, on the first day, God said, let there be light, and there was light. On the second day, and then tells you the story. It's transmitting a message to the subconscious mind in a way that the person's intellect cannot understand this. They need to use it as a story, as a mythology, as a myth, and that's how myths were. Transmitting truth, something to feed the learning, the expansion, feeding the subconscious mind, because this is what impacts conscious reality 95 to 98% of the time, in a good way or bad way. So, in the New Testament, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. First sentence in the Gospel of John. And the Word was God. Word here is a mistranslation of the Logos, which Christ, or Christ consciousness, is in line with the Logos. And there's a lot of loss in translation in both the Old Testament and the New Testament, especially the Old Testament, but that's a whole other story. I don't know if we'll touch on it or not. But in Eastern philosophies, you have the primordial Aum that created the universe. Not Om, it's A-U-M, that's Aum. And I can talk about later what I believe Aum stands for, and not the sound itself, may not be. In ancient Egypt, they had very high art, religion, very complex and beautiful, empowering to the individual. They tell you that the universe was sung into being. The Aborigines in Australia tell you that the universe was created with two songs. In the West, Western science and academia, we have the Big Bang. In Kabbalah, they talk about the Tetragrammaton, the unpronounceable name of God. So everywhere you go, and without all the time digging so deep to get to it, it's right there in the beginning. That acts as the best hook. Come hither, draw, take me more seriously. It resonates with you. See, there are ways to drive reality toward correct expansion of consciousness or incorrect. And we've been dealing now with very important, debilitating, major archetypes that are competing with Christ consciousness, which is what we all should follow. And it's not just reserved for Christians. All religions, even atheists, the expansion of consciousness to be in line with true north, with the fundamental intelligence in the universe we call God is the Logos. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah, or if you're Buddhist, metta, loving,
exactly.
loving kindness.
Exactly.
You know.
Yes, has many different names. And all of these things started drawing me more and more, that started this personal research. It was not I specialize in ethnomusicology and music of West Asia, Turkish, Arabic, and Persian classical musics, which are microtonal, and they include notes that fall between the black and white keys on the piano, and more notes per octave, not just 12. C to C sharp to D. Non-musicians should know that there are 12 half-step. And the half-step in the Western octave is the smallest division of sound. Every time I use a jargon, I'm going to explain it because I'm not going to assume people know these basic things. They may have studied recorder a long time ago, but I'm going to assume that people don't know because this is very important. And unfortunately, I have to stay on the surface because for me to talk about more sophisticated jargon, I need to spend time to lay the ground and connect the dots. So people should keep this in mind. And again, feel free to ask specific questions if you want to guide me in this. But I'm going to give you just the umbrella of this complexity and how compelling it is and what trickles down to us as being music, that is not just what we think it is. It's far more than that. It's a system. When you understand these things, go deep into it over the years, you realize that music trickles down to us from a system in the past, seems to have come from Mesopotamia, cradle of cultures, because these microtonal systems that we call the maqam system that is now manifesting has been for a long period of time in Turkish classical music, Persian Sufi music, Arabic classical music, and that influenced so much the world, influenced immensely the raga system in India, Central Asian music of Azerbaijan, all the way to Western China. They use the mugam system there, similar to maqam. Maqam is spelled M-A-Q-A-M, mugam M-U-G-H-A-M, and went westward toward North Africa. And that's the origin of the blues. Microtonal music, blues, you can't play it on piano, you can play blues, but you can't play the notes between the notes. You need a voice or bending the string on a guitar or using instruments where you can bend the notes. You can do that on wind instruments like saxophones and trumpets.
Right.
But it's very tricky. So I'm giving support based on acoustics and what resonates with us and what humans seek and how far and deep this can go. That's where I'm coming from. Better understanding of the human being. And humans have practiced these things to very sophisticated levels that I'm getting the message that music is not just an art form. It's a system for unraveling consciousness, healing, revealing, creating rehabilitation, suggesting, supporting, furthering, lubricating our attempt to practice spirituality, to lose the self. It's played in rituals for healing transpossession in syncretic religions like Vodou, Santeria, Candomblé, and many other religions that came from West Africa region, was called Dahomey, and mixed with Catholicism and been practiced in the Americas. And still practiced in various parts of Africa, music for healing, in shamanic music, for example. It's function with psychedelic plants as sacraments or not. So what is this about? Well, it's to support us. And the force behind that is acoustics, the physics of sound. Acoustics is a branch in physics that focus on understanding sound and vibration. And that can go into so many things. But the system, the force behind all of that power that music has is raw harmony, unadulterated harmony. And this is called the Harmonic series. People should learn about it, again, either on my website or Wikipedia page, and there's a lot of things. Unfortunately, around big, powerful tools like that, there's a lot of woo-woo, as you would expect, and a lot of unconfirmed rumors and wishful thinking and stories without taken out of their context from the ancients, without really translating down. How can I, as Westerner, understand this in a non-dogmatic way?
Right.
Or I look outside. Or, not understand what this is truly about. Because most of the time, all the time sometimes, they are transmitting something our mind cannot understand, cannot fathom. So it feeds us a little truth that make us run toward them and grab on them. And the unfortunate thing is that ego inflation, lack of self-love, make us use them and talk about them and use them as a profession, but we're not fully benefiting from them. And that's something we were addressing earlier. It follows us even here. And that is eventually what breaks the legs of the guru, the shaman, the healer, if they're using powerful tools, knowledge, and psychedelics, music, sound, breath work, yoga, meditation. It's very hard to use these tools without going rogue. And what can exacerbate the situation is people's behavior and looking outside and raising high up on pedestal the person until they're subjected to their own ego trials. And like I said earlier, if they have not fully worked on themselves, on their darkness, on their pain, recontextualizing things, that is what will break them down and fall, and people blame. And we're in that cycle, so we need to understand that. But we won't go there now, but this is happening because of this. I'm going to get back in line with sound and this power based on the question you asked me. I'm just showing these things, how much they impact reality and create a different reality, healthy or unhealthy one. And the more discernment we have and understanding to these natural, organic, biological technologies that humans have been using, maybe this could be what will save us. But we need to see it as technology to empower the self, to heal the self, to create the therapy, the healing, the regeneration, the rejuvenation, the rehabilitation, the education, all of that. This is what I see the future of medicine being, multidisciplinary, and understanding what else we can learn from the shamans, people who work with plants, Ayurvedic system, Chinese, all of that. We need to focus our energy there. Most powerful tool, I believe, is sound, music. And I believe this is what works through psychedelics. And we can take this apart. So if there is something so important like music, where we're using it all the time, and there's so much to understand about it, if we take that with rigor, with authenticity and integrity, at the end, what is doing the work is physics, and physics has been very reliable. And this is what's behind it is mathematics. Humans have tapped into these. We did not invent mathematics. It was either given to us or we tapped into, we discovered it. And physicists use mathematics to measure things to the tiniest level. So there's great level of accuracy. And there's no confabulation or wishful thinking, wishful believing. There is accuracy. And this leads us to an enormous intelligence in the universe, the logos, that the ancient Greek philosophers talked about. This is Christ consciousness. And the competing elements are Ahriman and Lucifer. But that's, again, another topic of conversation. I'm just saying again how much dimensions it can take us. Sure. The universe is encompassing so many things. And that's why it's hard to study sound, music as well, because there's a whole universe of being just an instrumentalist musician, just a singer, just a composer, just a conductor.
Right.
It's so rich. It can accommodate lifetimes of studies. So I've been trying over the years to follow my intuition, my imagination, inspiration, and these are the most reliable tools I discovered within myself. Coincidentally, realized that later that Rudolf Steiner talked extensively about this and wrote a book about them. And these are three powerful tools within all of us that we should explore them well beyond what we think we have been. And they're not just for artists. We all should be artists in our spirituality. Music, sound, there's a reason why sound healing now is everywhere. It wasn't around 10, 15 years ago. It was around very little, but very few people were into it. Now it's becoming the new yoga, and everybody wants to be a sound healer, and that's great. Why? Because of all the chaos and everything that's emerging, and all the huge things are happening so minutely, closer in the time concrescence. More and more events are happening in shorter and shorter periods of time. So consciousness is going through something immensely important. It's a huge transition. Very important one, and we need to see the good in it, but how we behave, how we understand it, how much awareness we have is what's going to make it or break it, I believe. And I'm not creating haste and doom and gloom. No. We need to treat it with poise. And when we use pure harmony, the harmonic series, which is something that not only musicians take very seriously, it's mostly actually physicists and mathematicians, because it's a series of infinite mathematical ratios. This is the one thing that will always be there. If our continent, our Earth, our solar system, our universe dissolves, what you're left with is the invisible scaffolding of the universe called the Logos.
Mm-hmm.
And the harmonic series,
which is the sacred geometry, the
sacred
harmonics,
geometry,
the whole
fields,
thing,
the phenomena, the systems, the patterns, the harmonies.
It's the Tao that's older than God in many ways.
That cannot be named.
Right.
This is where we come from, but it's imperceptible.
That births the 10,000 things, but it's the source that births the 10,000 things.
And that can create, this intelligence can create an infinite number of realities if we go through misguided perception, through unintended intentions and misspoken words, misdirected attention, frazzledness and chaos, noise. Physics is a very reliable thing that works on us all the time. Whether the person believes that gravity exists or not, understands how it works or not, is aware if it exists or not, if this person tries to jump from a 10-story building, they're going to go down. It's just, let's keep it simple. So that is very reliable. And this is why metaphysicists, we need to bring the meta back to physics, the ancient Greek philosophers who inherited very, very important advanced knowledge, where it came from is a very important thing to discuss. I believe that this came from somewhere. Personally, I believe it came from Zoroastrianism, from the first monotheistic religion that came out of Persia. And the Magi, the Persian, this is where the word magic comes from, and their interest and knowledge of Hermetic knowledge and astronomy.
And then you go back to the pre-Diluvian cultures.
Pre-Diluvian culture.
Ancient history.
Atlantis and Lemuria. Exactly. So this is very serious stuff that very important spiritualists talked about it, and we should take it seriously. People like Rudolf Steiner, person who created the Waldorf school system, anthroposophy, eurythmy, and biodynamic farming. Madame Blavatsky, creator of theosophy, and Sleeping Prophet, Edgar Cayce. So I'm also interested in that, and that influenced so much the way I perceive reality and understood science, the academic field that I specialized in, and the fact that I started becoming interested in meditation at age 14 and playing music in the harsh condition I grew up in. So this shaped my brain and the way my neuroplasticity worked to create a very unique way of understanding reality. So this I'm bringing to people. You're talking about my personal experience. Does not mean it's the only way of perceiving it. But what I realized over the years is that, humans can create all sorts of different realities. Which one is convenient, which one is not? Which one is full of resonance, harmony, where we're not chaotic and killing each other and having anxiety and fear and wars and all of these things that we find more and more in the world. The harmonic series is a series of infinite frequencies existing together as one system, stable, ever existent. In my opinion, this is the best, more assured way of experiencing the Logos, to stay in tune. The problem is that when we derail, when we go psychotic, or when we go mad or rogue, our awareness goes along with that. It dwindles down and it atrophies. So we don't have the awareness that we are so smart, but we're no longer wisdomless. No, we create new systems. Unless the person has personal practice into spirituality, into esoteric knowledge, occult practice, but in a grounded way. Way that creates divide. That's the trap.
Right.
Start to tell the story without really acting it, creating divide. I know. And that's the tendency when the person is still dealing with insecurities and they just want to shine. They just want to be accepted. They want to be acknowledged. They want to be seen. And every person in the world, all of us have that issue to various levels and degrees. Again, this is where self-love heals that. So,
and that's one of the more benign effects that you actually see. What's more malignant, I think, is when it's not just I want to shine and I want to be in my radiance. It's I want to be more radiant than you. I want to shine more than you.
Exactly.
And it's in the comparative nature of it. Because I think it's actually healthy for all of us to want to allow our
Yes.
unique essence to shine.
Yes.
To be the most, it's like my job to be the most Aubrey I can be, your job to be the most Alexandre you can be. In fact, it was Jesus's job to be the most Jesus he could be, which ultimately yielded his Christ consciousness, if you believe the story as it's been told. But that's the beautiful way to tell the story. Same with Enoch. Enoch became so Enoch that he was Metatron, walking so close with God. But it's through the prism of ourselves. So yes, we want it, but connected to others and not comparing and trying to be better than anyone else. Like that's where it gets malignant, I think.
Yeah.
Like, and so one, yes, there's a desire to shine. Okay, beautiful. But the moment you're like, I want to shine more than you, or I'm better than you, or my ideas are better than you, my ideologies are better than you, I'm more good than you. That's where things get really malignant.
Really malignant. Absolutely. This is a very important point. I was talking about the inception of that, but it's so important to always go back to these theories and inceptions and ideas so that we understand how they impact the reality we live through and we create to no longer do that. And the answer again is harmony, love, like all of these frequencies, starting with the fundamental tone. And if you multiply this fundamental frequency, whether it's 101 hertz or 0.6 hertz or 3,781 0.5 hertz, you multiply it by 2, it gives you the first harmonic up. You multiply it by 3, it gives you the second harmonic up. And so on and so forth to infinity. This is the place where the idea of God comes from, seems that. And that's what is being transmitted to us in a hidden way. But like all big truth, they're not giving to us on silver plate, because the point of that truth is for us to do work, to take it apart, to think that we're right and realize we were wrong all along, but we didn't know what we didn't know, and correct things and fine-tune the journey, the sculpting, changing reality in the head, different neural pathways, to find the right reality where we're back to harmony, existing in the universe, and learning from what the universe, us, is going through, learning about itself, its existence. We are, as the saying goes, we are the eyes and the ears of the universe. And realize that this little narcissism that wanted us to shine eventually led us to become so separate from each other. But we had to go through that to learn something indispensable. So we don't trust the process. We create anxiety, we create fear, we project into the future, and more fear we create, the farther away from love we drift. Harmony is what will bring us back. Music, and that's the force majeure behind all religions. This is something I take very seriously. I have a presentation, keynote presentation I give about this same topic for 7 hours of how book religions, Eastern philosophies, mystical sects, shamanic tribes, and use sound as the most powerful force to get you back to harmony, to healing, what we call healing. Healing, usually the word of choice that's used, but it's not just healing. It's finding, tracing back the self, rehabilitation, correcting the misguided perception, the noise, the part of us that wants to stand out. And that's the reptilian brain. And there may be hacking of that too. It gets really complicated. What I understood over the years is that harmony is the most powerful force behind music that is used everywhere to entrain people differently. And you can make whole industries out of it. You can make powerful religions out of it. Most powerful authority in the world is the Roman Catholic Church. That's the Roman Empire continuing to exist, just rebranded itself. Jesus had no intention to create a new religion called Christianity. He just wanted to create a reform because people mishandled this power and went rogue, right? When he goes into the temple kicking chairs and tables and telling people you can't sell, you can't make a market out of the house of my father. And so that's something we do. We drift away. When we were on the right course, when religions do good, why do we do that? Why are we no longer on the right track? What causes it? I believe it's a trauma. Again, going back, we cannot be that imperfect. But the problem with the imperfection is that we think that this is the same baseline. It's not. It's a different baseline. So corrupt, so inhumane, so bizarre. I mean, things are becoming psychedelic in the world. Those with knowledge of psychedelic journeys and good use of psychedelic and good set and setting have done the best dress rehearsal, because it's getting gnarly, very bizarre.
For sure.
And we cannot keep up with everything. So how can we resort to a very powerful, effective tool, understanding how the new medical system, and now there's huge interest in psychedelic research. Those who are not aware of should look into what has been done and how promising, and the mishandling too. And we're still breaking each other's legs. As we try to work on psychedelic medicines, you need to become part of the healthcare system and no longer well-being, and to be grounded in our approach, because we are likely to create more cults when we take things out of context, because this lack of belief in the self and the narcissism can follow us through in psychedelics, and that has happened so much. So we need to understand the byproduct of using powerful tools, because ego inflation is debilitating. You get spiritual materialism, spiritual bypassing, messianism. People should look up these terms, because I don't have time to define how they manifest. We have pathological altruism. We have a lot of things, again, if people are using it as medicine, not technology, this is a byproduct of what can happen, because we're not treating with a great level of discernment the real, true cause of the problem, which is part of us still wants to shine, still want to capitalize something, still jipping the self, and approach that with compassion and empathy, and not criticize others of how much wrong they're doing. We're all trying to do our best at the end. But we're not using them with discernment.
Do you believe that that's entirely true? Do you think that there's some people who are intending to do their worst?
Yes, because they're traumatized, and that's the best they can do, and that's something we don't fully understand. We still find a way to criticize them and blame them, when really these dictators, these people killed millions of people thinking they're doing good in the world and were ruthless and inhumane, are damaged people, and we need to fully understand that this is something that happens all the time.
So even in the most intentional malice, like what you're saying is, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Like fundamentally,
and we need to treat them, not just forgive them. We need to treat them.
Right.
We need to realize that either an accident, the blow on the brain, or very extreme trauma from childhood, and fear and abuse and sexual abuse and all sorts of crazy things and cults, or misuse of to self-medicate, and in the process worsening the condition, eventually can create the most ruthless psychopath and sociopath. And yes, these are people who need healing, they need rehabilitation, they need support and isolation. I'm not saying keep them out, but no, we need to create a system that tries to do the best in reharmonizing them, bringing multidisciplinary approach to treatment, very sophisticated, and hopefully the AI can help us with that, and not develop this extreme fear of AI that in the process be inactive, finding a healthy way to use AI, because this can be a very powerful tool. And understand the nature of this matrix that we live in. And what is the point? What is going on? Also, I bring into this also stories that trickle down to that, besides the parasitic forces, and stories that are transmitted to us through ancient societies, Sumerians, shamanic societies, and to understand more about reality and what we need to understand, because there's a journey, and this journey is very important. Now we're dealing with very powerful technologies, psychedelics. They're not for everybody. Sound meditation is for everybody. Why?
Right.
They're a very powerful tool, because when people do them, they need to know a lot about how to do them, and they're not just medicine and not just that shamanic story, plant spirit and whatnot. There's a lot of confusion, misuse of words. If people take mushrooms, that's not a plant, it's a fungi. So that means we need to explain the difference between that, and fungi are closer to animals than to plants. So we're dealing with very powerful technologies. But this idea that the plant spirit is there to heal us is an unconfirmed rumor. That the plant or the fungi, and when we talk about plants, we don't realize that, LSD, MDMA, and ketamine in good setting can be medicines or good technologies. Because there's plenty of research that They are worthy. So if we say plant spirit, then literally that reality means plant medicines, which is being used all the time. I bring awareness to these words because it's one example of how we're driving reality through misuse of words that creates a different, deep understanding, and that exhibits Egypt of the self, not owning it, not being judicious, attentive, discerning to the things that we need to do to wake up in a grounded way.
To me, this is part of like when you offered your sound meditation, it's not just about the sound you're playing. And I also want to talk about how we've gotten wrong with the harmonics, because we still haven't gotten there to that issue, which is important that we get to, as obviously we could keep these microphones going for days and just continue to talk about everything.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I think you represent in the logos of who you are, which was so profound, which was the undercurrent beneath the music you were playing and beneath everything else, is the precise attention to harmony and resonance with truth, which, for those people listening, they might be like, why is he continuing to be so concerned about words, right? When really what you're saying is that every little attunement to truth matters. Like every single thing matters. And that's the big takeaway that I've gotten from the time in your presence, is the meticulousness and patience by which you go through every little thing. And one might think like, whatever, we use whatever word we want. We got such a problem. We just need to fucking solve it. Call them plants, call them fungus, call them whatever the fuck you want. Doesn't matter. We have a problem. We got to fix it. But that's part of that panic mentality. And what you're saying is, slow the fuck down.
That's what you said.
Pay attention, even if it's the 11th hour, 1 minute left, slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Exactly.
Go slow, be poised, be true, and then actually trust that resonance that you're creating will create the harmony that you're looking for. And so like that's for those people who are like, why is he so, but this is who you are. This is like a deep encoding of the medicine, which was why it had such a profound effect, because you as an instrument are tuned to the meticulousness of truth in every action and word or sound that you make.
Thank you very much. Very touched. Here's why. With all the vocabulary, all the experience, the knowledge, the practice, the curiosity that I have, that I transmit to people out of compassion, interest, and excitement, childlike excitement and curiosity must remain with us. That is the healthiest way to forge through reality. And to stay in balance between the inner feminine and masculine, and to tap into gnosis, our embodied knowledge of the heart, experiential knowledge, non-intellectual knowledge. We are a species that focus so much on what the ancient Greeks philosophers called episteme, where the word epistemology comes from, in deep interest in logic, discernment, reasoning, which is important, but became out of balance with experiential knowledge of the heart that became encoded in us. I want to nurture that and nourish it and prepare people, because what they will experience at that moment in time in the right place, through their own endeavor, getting the mud out of the way, realizing it's the haste that's driving the inconvenient reality, and pay attention and be in a greater level of inner harmony, of poise, of equanimity, not naming anymore, and realizing that the naming happens all the time, and we pursue this naming, these thoughts, and just being present. No one can talk about that. No one can get someone to experience it. It has to come from the self. There are no words. Our words, languages are for this reality. Try to describe a DMT trip or a psychedelic trip with words. Try to describe a deep meditative state you had in your meditation yesterday. So it's these words that are creating this reality. And I can talk later about, after I talk about what we did to music and why I do this, and talk about what language is actually, what it comes down to. So I want to prepare the person to have the biggest gift, what I call to become the art. My art is about you becoming the art. But we have a lot of catching up to do, and that's why I gave that, 4-hour long keynote presentation on Apple TV. or longer probably. So there's so much of exciting things and interconnectedness. I'm trying to do a little bit of this in our beautiful flow here, but there's so much to learn. Why? When you know these things and put them together and be inspired, then you're nurturing your own capacity to tap into something we have all within us, the Da'at, Kabbalah, the Gnosis, the Rikpa, the Jnana, embodied knowledge to lead us to understand what does it mean to have a likeness of God within us, to go back to being everything and nothing at all, to the beginner's mind, to the unified field, to pure love where there's nothing to do, nothing to be. It's just all perfect. And I've been there numbers of times, experienced it in different ways, in different gradations. And that's not something I can tell people about. I can talk about this in very different ways and compose music that would suggest that, but it's not like you being there. And I just want to excite people enough to keep that in mind, that this is the most important thing, where you are one with the Logos in the most beautiful, balanced way, not cheesy, new agey way, but true essence of spirituality, that you are all of that. I really understood that. And changing the story is what will get us there. Realize, first of all, that there's a story happening in us. We're not trained to experience music like that because in the West, with the development of our religions, society, culture, and wonderful science and academia, we diverted. We went a little rogue. We started pursuing novelty. We started distancing ourselves from woo-woo and superstition so much that we threw away the baby with the water. Spirituality became divorced from science. And this even happened with the presence of Sir Isaac Newton, who was into spirituality, into alchemy, more of an alchemist than mathematician and physicist in secret. And alchemy, people should keep in mind that it's not just about transmuting heavy metals to gold, although that seems to be possible, but there's far bigger, more spiritual aspect of it, which is exiting the matrix, understanding what reality is about. They created the Royal Academy of Science after having met with church officials, said, well, we need to research whatever we want. The church said, yes, but don't come close to consciousness, should be kept for religions and mystical sects. So that, I believe, was the inception where things went wrong, but we still excelled in the marvelous things with science and what music became later on. I'm getting into that. But the split is that these scientists started focusing so much on separating themselves and legitimizing what they do, not making sure that there's no woo-woo, no superstition, because it was rampant. And that got us to this point. Now, what we did to music...
I mean, the fundamental idea is in science you control all other variables by isolating one variable.
Yes.
Which is the absolute opposite about how any complex system works in the universe, which is we're all interconnected. It is impossible to isolate variables.
Yes.
It's impossible to isolate one plant in the rainforest. It's impossible to isolate one fungus from
the entourage.
It's the whole thing, right? And it all works in the complexity because of the inherent logos, the sacred geometry, the natural law that occurs, that's always there and ever present. But science, in its attempt to isolate different components from everything else, yes, you can learn something about that component, but you only learn a limited amount of information because that component's always in relationship to other components. Same with values and ethos and morality.
Yes.
Like if you isolate one value over and then just don't weigh that in the field of value, you're going to go way off course, right? Like if honesty, let's take honesty, and this is a slight divergence, so I want to get right back to your thread. But like just talking about the field of value, this is something also my teacher Rebbe Gaffney and I talk about a lot is, all right, let's say honesty is a value. Sure, of course it is. Now, let's take the movie Inglourious Bastards, and you have the Jew hunter in your house. Well, you don't tell him, oh yeah, I got Jews in the basement. You lie. You lie because there's another value, which is the protection of life. and goodness that actually at that point supersedes. So every value is relative to the other fields of value that are there. And that's what the master has to do. And that's what actually the good scientist or the good doctor does, is they look at everything in relationship. Yes, you can isolate the thing and say this is beautiful in its pure form. And there is no such thing as the pure form isolated from the rest of the whole. It's all connected.
Yes. It's all connected. But this all connectedness and the truth became part of secret society, the underground. Yeah, they part of the Kabbalah as well, and this is called the left hand. So in mystery school teaching, we seem to have fallen, and we talked about Atlantis and Lemuria and ancient advanced civilizations that the Rig Vedas talk about, the most ancient texts, high culture, and we lost. What caused that? Many things. The flood, most likely, is the last one, and maybe there have been different floods. We didn't talk about how the flood could have happened. We can talk about that later because I have 2 theories. But is that we have been not dealing correctly with knowledge. Knowledge seems to be the ultimate power, because if we have knowledge, then we demystify the nature of so many of these things that we're talking about. Except these authorities that have been creating reality for people, nobilities, aristocracy, and then religions and governments and secret societies all along, and media know a lot about reality, that they're able to create social engineering and social design. And that's what drives reality, creating memes and patterns and concerns. So the trauma is behind all of that. And interest in the knowledge, but wanting to practice secretly, not tell others about it for a variety of different reasons. Isaac Newton didn't want to be burned on the stake, but he was into, and all of these inventors, like Tesla, Einstein, they were into spirituality and far out things, and many physicists as well. So why do we not use this knowledge to create goodness? Because the reality now is created by the left hand that is using this mystery school teaching that went underground, that Plato tried to transmit, and the Republic is about how you can use ancient Greek music to change the pathos of people in an entire city. It's not just about philosophy. Socrates tried to do this, sowing impiety in the minds of young people, telling them Pythagorean secrets. Pythagoras and the ancient Greek philosophers brought this knowledge from the Magi, from Zoroastrianism, that preserved it. And that's what triggered culture. This is a very serious thing. But the Athenian government didn't like what Socrates did. They threw him in jail and forced him to drink poison and commit suicide. Plato encoded it. People should look into the work of Professor J. Kennedy, his book about the encoding of Plato's work, that you need to understand what he's encoding, things related to mathematics, ancient Greek music, and music theory. So there's this knowledge that the guiding force, the healing, the ending, the infinite way of creating reality has been lost, impacted tremendously with one act that we did, and it went unnoticed, is that we in the West took the octave and divided it into 12 equidistant half steps to create a specific temperament. When you do that, the frequencies that you're playing on the piano, if it's equal tempered, almost all of them will not be aligned with the harmonic series frequency as the guiding light, the guiding principle, the ever existing, the most signal, that which will always be there, even if everything that you know disappears. The scaffolding, the intelligence, the logos, the system, patterns, phenomena, and visual sacred geometry, all of that, we're trying to learn about it from various fields. The most useful thing for us to get back there is physics, acoustics, to guide us back, even when we think we know. What are you talking about? Everything's great. You only think is great, and that's something psychedelics teach us, especially when done in good setting where there's paying attention, and they're not just being taken as medicine. You can do that on a person People can go to a Fish concert and Grateful Dead and everything else and parties and Burning Man. But at the end, it can create a healing experience. But at the end, how much attention? How are we flippantly labeling, perpetuating the mislabeling? If this is happening, what is this about? Do we think it's a plant spirit? Do we think it's the ancestors and all these things? What are the consequences of us calling it something? Are we being empowered? Are we trying to gyp the self yet again? What works in the process, I'm realizing, is sound, music. As the tryptamines, psilocybin, psilocin, the DMTs, create heightening of the auditory cortex to guide us back to a state of harmony. And we call that many stories. I personally believe that grandmother, when you drink ayahuasca, is you, man, is an aspect of you. It's just the lenses, the filters, and we're connecting to the field that is all us. And grandmother ayahuasca or the spirits are not something else outside of us. We think they're outside. At the end, one of the deepest truths for us to understand is there's no inside and outside.
Yeah, like what Rumi says, that you're not a drop in the ocean, you're the ocean in a drop. And also when you shift perspective from the small individual I to a larger I, which I think the ayahuasca, the eye of consciousness of ayahuasca is actually connected to the complexity of the jungle itself. It is like Gaia. So it's like a Gaia level consciousness which exists within us, but also that perspective will offer a different viewpoint to your life.
Yes.
And so it creates the sense of this is separate, but it's really just a shift of identity.
Yes.
To a more holistic identity.
More holistic, absolutely, going back to perceiving the world differently, reality, the cosmos, the universe differently. And this is what in Hermeticism they say it's all mental. The universe is mental, it's all mind, you're all of that. That's the ultimate truth that I'm finding, again, whether in Sufism, and I studied Sufi music minutely, deeply, played it too, microtonal music, and this the journey that I went through and the specialization helped me understand these things in a way that others don't, based on my life experience and my endeavor and all the suffering. Everything came together. Mm-hmm. And that's what every person should look for, because there's no need for haste to find meaning, mission in life, or find value or purpose. It's there. You're just not contextualizing properly. You're mislabeling it. And that's where the healing, the rehabilitation needs to come. So the guiding force is sound, is these frequencies. Now, the equal temperament that we did in the West, the quantization of the 12 equidistant, the 12 half steps that we became equidistant, keep in mind that things become more complex if you go into other cultures, musical systems. Indian classical music, for example, it's 22 divisions in an octave. They call them 22 shrutis. Shruti, S-H-R-U-T-I. In Arabic classical music and Persian, it's 24 tones, double, 12. In Turkish classical music, also using the maqam system, is 53 tones. In Byzantine chants, the chants that are sung in the Greek Orthodox Church, I grew up in that church. My parents were not very religious, but I was imbued by these. They alter your consciousness. Mm-hmm. Ethos creates a different pathos. So the music, and when you listen to classical Persian, Turkish, Arabic classical music, sitting and listening without any substance, it is known, and this is known culturally, and I've experienced many times, playing it, listening to it, it's a very known thing. You go into a state of tarab, T-A-R-A-B. It's a state of euphoria, of ecstasy, enchantment that is induced by deep listening, judicious listening, attentive, intentional, preferably you sitting down and not doing things. You benefit something, but that's limited. If you're washing the dishes, or you're cooking, or if you're having conversation, the more attention you give, and this is something that people should know, it goes on to infinite level of how much sound can entrain you. Acoustics can modify your consciousness. And it seems that humans use that in a variety of different ways. Mantra system, the sutra system, mantras that people use in meditation, incantation, prayers, and can be accompanied by dancing, whirling, or not, bodily movement or not. It doesn't have to be verbal. And you can do it in experiences and ceremonies for healing, trance, and possession, and I've studied that deeply, whether in North Africa, the Gnawa music, the music that was brought by the slaves from West Africa, became mixed with the Berbers and the Arabs and created music that is still practiced nowadays. This was healing music, Gnawa, and Candomblé and Santeria, and you have religions, so this is a very serious thing, but you come back to music that is played based on the encoding that's within us, because a singer will sing automatically whether she or he is trained over many years in a conservatory system in equal temperament or a university system. They will come back to singing in non-equal temperament, notes that cannot be played on a piano, on a guitar, because these shrutis are notes between the notes. So you need a fretless instrument like a violin, viola, cello, bass, where there are no divisions, like on a bass guitar or guitar, 6-string or 12-string guitar. Instruments like pianos with keyboard, where this key, that key, can't play in between. Harpsichords, organs, marimbas, vibraphones, and xylophone. These are all instruments that allow you to play this and that, but humans favor the blue notes, the notes between the notes. And when you are using music of other cultures and religion that I mentioned, you're dealing with very sophisticated tonal system. So you have different modes, or maqamat, plural of maqam. A mode is a group of notes like a scale. But we reduced the power of the scale in the West because of the system, which became about novelty. And it gave us a lot of wonderful things, and we created, nonetheless, a testament to human ingenuity and creativity, amazing musical systems. Classical music is fantastic. That's my training. I came from that. I played late medieval music, Renaissance, early Baroque, and played classical period music and romantic and contemporary. I've experienced playing these things. I played jazz. I played progressive rock. I played bluegrass and blues. What you get at the end is that music is impacting you differently. Are you closer to the laws of physics, to the harmonic series, or not? Then you're going to get entertainment. You're going to get an industry, no longer music that take you to God closer. Those who did it best in religion, in my opinion, and that took me many years to understand, are Quranic chants in Islam and the Greek Orthodox with Byzantine chants. Gregorian chants of the Catholic Church also deal with modes, but they're not as sophisticated. So these modes that the ancient Greeks had music very similar and impacted, influenced by, and influenced also Turkish classical music and Arabic classical music. So this is where I was saying that the creator of civilization, West Asia, preserved a very ancient, sophisticated musical system that Plato was trying to talk about without directly talking about it. To give someone at some point in the future this message, and we are discovering it 22 centuries later. In the same way that the Gnostics wrote books, buried them in the sand, were discovered 2 big set of books, the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in Qumran by the Dead Sea, and the Nag Hammadi Library in southern Egypt. Nag Hammadi is the name of the region. And they told us about a lot of crazy things. God that we follow, Jehovah, is the demiurge. We have not been following the right God. This is the Gospel of Thomas, and many things about parasitic forces plaguing the human mind. So archonic forces. The guiding force seemed to be music and harmony, but something within us has driven us away. In the same way, we created glyphosate and GMO and tried to improve on nature based on ignorance, based on deliberate attempt, or based on interest in profit.
Yeah.
We need to take this very seriously, because this is, I believe, what has crippled the evolution of humanity. Driven by trauma, driven by separation from the self and from the real God, soul, different God. And then we have science that is reductionist and wearing an invisible straitjacket, trying to do its best. And we come, throw it away and go and be native. No, let's stop doing that. We all have bits and pieces of the truth. Are we using them in a following resonance harmony? So music need to be taken seriously. And when you go into sound healing experience or sound bath, you are receiving sound coming from instruments that allow you to hear these harmonics in a clearly audible way. And these harmonics are notes that humans seek and they play whenever they can or sing, but we are tied down to a system that's trying to quantize things and we're trying to exit it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're being reharmonized, but the more you pay attention to it, because the harmonic series exists for a variety of different reasons to guide you back toward the logos, and if you use it properly. And when you use psychedelics, what psychedelics do, they're amplifiers. Stan Grof called them amplifiers. They are amplifiers. They're not the real medicine. I believe, based on practice and based on deep research and over 20 years, 30 years of field work in over 40 countries and studies that I've done and hundreds of experiences, they amplify the power of music and sound and make you dissolve. The Sufis do the same thing. They go into state of al-fana, total dissolution of the ego. The Indians do it. They call it bhava and rasa. This is something that everyone is doing. So psychedelics get the mind out of the way, disconnect you from the default mode network, the egoic mind, who we think we are, that was created based on parental imprinting, society, culture, religions as operating systems, our habits, our interests, our education, the language we use. But all of that create a wiring. So psychedelics disconnect us from that and seem to allow us to tap into an aspect of the self that is obstructed by the education, the indoctrination, the belief, the social engineering, the ideas we have. And now there's plenty of evidence that we are breaking away from the establishment. People come and outsource the establishment's transmission to coming and watching and listening to your podcast and many podcasts. So people are starting to design this. So we have something that wants to wake up, that wants to change the story, and curiosity is driving us. But the more aware, the more multidisciplinary, the more aware of what is it that we're trying to heal from. What are the powerful tools? Why do we call something medicine when it's not really acting as medicine? Because technologies like psychedelics are, the person is hacking their operating system. They better know what they're doing.
Right.
You just need one psychotic episode for the person to close the door on these, if they come back, on these most powerful tools. We need to keep them as allies. We need to understand them with humility, with deep understanding that the shamanic tribes have a story, but the story is not exactly what is that. We need to put things together, and we need to help them with our science, with our spirituality, and our knowledge of so many things. We have a lot to learn. Ignorance is not a bliss. It's bliss in the first stages, but it's the biggest curse. So we come back to knowledge as the ultimate power. But I believe, come back again, the most powerful, reliable source of powerful tools and technology is sound, is pure harmony.
Mm-hmm.
I just told you about a bunch of different examples. I wish I have several days to take you deep into that, but I encourage people to look deep into it in an authentic way and to avoid hooey and hokey stuff and the tendency of talking about the power of sound and the spirit of sound without making any substance. That's the human condition.
Mm-hmm. Now, just so I understand, so when I'm playing an instrument, let's say I'm playing the didgeridoo. I'm not a great musician by any stretch of the imagination, but I actually have developed some limited capacity to circular breathe, and so I can keep the didge going. And it's playing in a particular harmonic based upon the size and length of the didge and the shape of my mouth, etc. But these live instruments that you're playing, the harmonics that are created from those feel to be like beneficial, helpful, true.
Mm-hmm.
And is that fair to say? Or
you are spot on. Yes.
Okay.
They
so like
guide you back.
Yeah.
They guide you back. They show you where signal. They remind you where signal is. Remember, reality has been driven by, the best way I can describe is noise, static, eagerness, anxiety, fear, these unhealthy, we call them lower vibrational states. Raise your vibration is a sentence you hear a lot in pop spirituality. It's true, but people talk about it. They may not know how to go to it. And what does that kind of mean? What should it boil down to? So when you're playing the didgeridoo, to explain to people listening, watching, the instrumentalist, and didgeridoo comes from Australia, and humans always seek harmonics, whether they are contemporary, modern-day sound healers, people who do sound bath or sound therapists, sound practitioners, better term, than sound healer. Sound facilitator, there's more humility, and we're talking about what's going on. That's important to keep in the mix. Is playing an instrument. And in the case of didgeridoo, which is used sometimes in this, sometimes gongs, discs, bells, bowls, crystal or Himalayans, you are projecting harmony to clearly audible level. The harmonic series exists for a variety of different things. Mostly is to give us the tone color, the timbre of anything we listen to, which provides us with information, hidden information that you only experience the byproduct of it, because these harmonics that are found in any sound, whether the sound of a note played on a flute, the same register C or G flat, played on a flute, on a violin, on a piano, on a ukulele, human voice, the sound sounds different because of the harmonics. But you don't clearly hear them. You think it's one note, but it's actually mostly one note. If you were to do harmonic spectrum analysis, and people can go on my website and see what that looks like in video or in images, something like Isotope RX, a sophisticated software that is used for editing, sound editing, music editing, or Adobe Audition, you can see the harmonics that are there overshadowed by the primacy, the loudness, the high amplitude of the fundamental frequency. So we think it's only one note. It's mostly one note. When you play specific instruments that are made from specific metal, have a unique shape, or involve you in modifying 4 important things to create the tone color, I'll name them in a bit, you can bring out these harmonics to clearly audible level. Then you get the gongs that we play, small, big, flat, nipple gongs, boss gongs, all sorts of diameters and shapes, or the tuning forks, or the singing bowls, metallic or crystal, overtone singing, didgeridoos, bells, discs, shruti boxes, harmoniums. Then there is sound healing, sound therapy, or reminding your body of harmony. And the more you get the mind out of the way, and that's why I like the word sound meditation. Yes, my website is soundmeditation.com, but I did not coin the term. I just was one of early people 25 years ago to realize the power of that, and I picked the term. It was being used. I just found it to be more suitable, more true to communicating certain truth. Because again, go back to truth that you started talking about. That is important to keep in the mix, because sound wants to wake us up, and this is a huge truth that all Eastern philosophy at the end. This is at the end, but you need to know how to use it. You need to keep fine-tuning the story, the reporting, running wild and telling the story, but not really understanding it. If we do that, that's your exit from the matrix.
Right.
So this is the medicine of the future. This is understanding how it works through psychedelics and how we should empower the individual, how to use it, how to gain back agency, how to give them the right conditions of physics, of acting with integrity and using rigor, authenticity, and realizing the nature of the story and how the story can drive people to madness, to suicide. How we can help people bring back harmony and love. This is the logos. So these instruments entrain us when they're being played. And the more we get them out of the way, people should try this, you sit. If you've never tried sound healing experience, I'm using the term sound healing because this is what's known out there. But have a different attitude, different listening, to really be patient with the mind and just let go of the thoughts and come back and just listen. Eventually, it'll take them more and more into a state of groundedness, equanimity, connectedness to the heart, without the noise. And this happens all the time. Why? Physics impacts people in the same reliable way.
So let's give people some things as it's been such a beautiful conversation going, but let's give people some practical things that they can do, because there's ways that you can hum, chant, etc. So
that's a great idea.
You started with Aum as so I know there's you can go deep. We could probably talk for an hour about Aum and what that means, and the vowels and the consonants and how that shapes reality, and but maybe touch on that briefly. But then that's one way that we can actually get back into resonance is
Yeah.
that particular type of chant. So why is that one important? Why is it important that it's aum, not om?
Attacking each other and creating doom and gloom and getting more and bigger voice out of frightening people, because that's what the media does. Let's not do it further, especially people who are trying to do good. That's my 2 cents here. So this harmony, when we do it in our voice, and I do this to meditate, to quiet my mind in the quickest, most effective way. And I've been meditating for many years, since I was 14. I started with transcendental meditation, which gets you to repeat a mantra silently, but it still works. The power of sound works even if you're not voicing it out. That's how these mantras and sutras work. Sometimes it works in a different way. But I'm going to give an example of overtone singing so people can hear it if they've never heard it. What I'm doing basically is something anyone can learn to do. And when they do that, they can meditate and quiet the mind more effectively and quickly than a very seasoned meditator. Trust me on this. I've tried a variety of different forms of meditation and realized the most powerful thing is to use the power of acoustics, but of pure harmony, and better if you're producing it yourself. And I'm going to give this example. Through humming, the sophisticated way of producing it is overtone singing, which is, I'm going to give an example of a note. Let's say I can sing on this frequency. Ah, could be ah, ah, and I can sing it on different vowels. Ah, ee, oh, ee. All I'm doing, I did change the frequency, I can do that, but all I'm doing is opening and closing the vocal tract, which is the distance between the vocal cords and the lips. When you
Let me see. All right, so let me see if I can do this.
Yes.
'Cause I've a very difficult time actually
Let's do it.
matching any tones, but I can create a tone.
Yeah.
But I
I'll
can't
follow
have
it.
a
Don't worry about
difficult. Okay, so if I'm going to go through all the vowels and try and keep the same tone. Ah, ee, oh, ooh, I.
Exactly.
Okay.
You did it. Even though you think that you don't have the ear, the others. It's that simple.
Uh-huh.
What you're doing here, physics-wise, you are changing the spacing and the size of your vocal tract, including the buccal cavity. So, literally what's going on, your vocal cords are vibrating, and you're opening your mouth, dropping your jaw more and more, and shaping it differently. And this is what gives us the vowels that all languages have. A language has different sounds, mainly 2 categories, vowels and consonants. We'll get to consonants later. But vowels are so easy. We use them all the time in speech. To keep it simple, keep it on the same frequency. You chose oh, I, or oh, I. That's an octave higher. It could be a different note, but to keep it simple so that everyone can do that, so that they don't think that, oh, I'm going to have to learn how to sing. I'm so terrified. I have inhibition. Let's leave that story on the side. Let's not give excuses. It's a huge excuse.
Yeah, I think for me it's just the comfortability to find what is my natural tone.
Mid-range. Mid-range is comfortable.
Natural.
Yeah.
This is the natural tone, and a singer can sing naturally in many different tones.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So keeping it simple, again, I'm explaining sophisticated things, but I'm going to keep it tied to simplicity so that everyone can do it and not create a story. I'm not interested. Just do it as an exercise. Do it for fun. Do it without having anything to lose. Don't tell yourself a story that would make you not do it. And that's what we do, again. Or feel inept or feel, I can't sing. We're not talking about singing. Just pick a comfortable mid-range note would be comfortable for any person. High notes, top tessitura of the vocal range, and lowest. And some people have 2 octaves and some singers have 5 octaves. And we're not. We just stay in the middle, which is what everyone has. This is mid-range for me. Ah, ee, oh. What I'm doing, I'm opening and closing my mouth. I'm changing the waveform in acoustics physics of sound, that's called a waveform. You're changing the way the frequency is shaped based on the change of the interior design of your mouth. That includes everything. And every person has a different tone color, specific signature, because every person has different conditions, acoustical conditions that create their very unique set of harmonics. And these conditions are wider throat or narrower throat, big vocal cords, small, big uvula or smaller one, thick, thin, big, small, soft palate, high, hard palate, big tongue, teeth. All of these things create a different tempo, a different resonance chamber, where sound is amplified in a very specific way. And it'll always be that, and that becomes your signature. People, whether they know you or not, they know, oh, that's Aubrey, or that's a different person than the other one talking, because of the tone color. So important in navigating through reality. So important in communicating something so personal, our identity, our signature, insignia, so personal. Singers make a living to create huge power in the world because of their voice. So it's very impactful and very serious. You're changing the waveform, and people should look up waveform. And the waveform that they're going to see on Google, keep in mind, they're two-dimensional waveform. In reality, it's hyperdimensional. Now you can look at waveforms created using a 3D printer, but that's not all there is to see. So what this is about is that my vocal cords are pronouncing different vowels and consonants. I'm doing that to create words, and words that have a meaning because they have a symbology. And that's how we create reality. In a way, my words have an ethos, distinguishing quality, character, personality, spirit, word from ancient Greek, loan word from ancient Greek is used in many languages. Through these words, I communicate what's going on inside of me, and this is how we've been having this chat, and that's what drives reality. The ideas, feelings, emotions, thoughts, sensations, micro thoughts, developed thoughts are communicated through random sounds that humans learn to create a language out of that, even alphabet, to be able to write them down. My ancestors, the Phoenicians, created the first alphabet through which the Roman alphabet came by, a way to depict the letter in something you can write and someone else can read it. So this drives reality, literally. When we speak words that have symbology, and of course the person has to know the same language in order for the reality to be, right? And that's how the law is created. That's how each empire kept people speaking their own language, but enforced the lingua franca, the common tongue, to enforce the laws to create that reality. Roman
or if
Empire,
they wanted to hide or conceal,
all of that is done.
They would speak in Latin to people who couldn't
Precisely.
understand Latin. So then they were the ones who had access to the divine law, and everybody else had to follow the common law. But they had a special set of rules. So if ever they wanted to change the common law and do whatever the fuck they wanted, they could just speak something in Latin and say, I'm getting the logos from somewhere else.
Exactly. And there's authority in it. And there's a lot of hidden meaning, authority, hegemony, the control, the high society. Look what the English did in Africa. English, you can speak whatever you want, but you need to say. So you follow. So these consonants and vowels are all waveforms. And this, when you speak, you are creating a vibrational state that comes out of your mouth, shaped by your unique shape of the interior design, the vocal tract. And this wave does not go to hurtle toward you. It hurtles through moving the molecules in the air. And the molecules stay where they are. And the vibration change, that's the whole thing, is waveform. And doesn't always go directly toward your ears. It bounces on walls and ceilings, gets absorbed by furniture and curtains, and studios are designed in a way where and a anechoic chamber, quietest room, I went and did research in it, quietest room in the world is in Minnesota. where you go and no sound bounces on the wall, everything gets absorbed.
I hear that people go a little mad.
No,
in a room like
that's
that.
not
That's
true.
not
They
true.
tell you that. No, I was able to be there and meditate. No, but it's very odd. It's very, very
Because
novel.
you just start to hear your body.
You hear body noise and everything. Exactly. Because sound gets absorbed, does not come back to you, and you start to hear fine. So basically, sound drives reality. And when my words are listened to you, enter the ears and all the elements in the ears, the three bones. First of all, the sound vibrating the cilia, the hearing cells, and we have 20,000 of them in each ear, and they start to die the day we're born. That's nothing compared to 125 million photoreceptors in each eye. So important to protect the hearing. The sound goes into very sophisticated processing in the auditory cortex, and that creates reality. This is what they're talking about. So this ethos creates pathos.
Mm-hmm.
These are my theories around how reality is created following it. And I'm going to come back to these harmonics and the exercise. But I'm just informing people about something so important to learn about, that it's just not simple exercise. This ethos creates pathos, and that's how we create reality, through language. That's how stories are told, songs are sung, speeches are given, prayers, everything. This ethos creates pathos. And most of the time, the ethos, out of ignorance, misguidedness, not paying attention, ends up by creating a different pathos. Words are not defined properly. People don't use a limited language. That's what I meant earlier by, if you know how to speak and know all there is to know about language, God said, let there be light, how this language creates reality, and ancient biblical texts are encoded with the science of harmonics. People should look into my friend's work, Howard Barry Schatz, someone who went so deep into in Kabbalah, and now he teaches it to rabbis, and he happened to study the esoteric side of sound with Ernst MacLean, who kept the torch that Plato was talking about. They're all encoded with the science of harmonics and the ultimate truth. He was able to decode the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, that's attributed to Abraham, that the ultimate message given through is that harmonic series is a living God. So it's a very serious matter, but that's a whole other story. I'm going to come back to what your mouth is doing. It's creating consonants and vowels. Let's keep vowels on the right side. Vowels and consonants. Consonants are vowels, but you add to them, besides opening and closing the buccal cavity, which changes the physics of the sound, you add to them something part of your mouth. Like E becomes T when your tongue touches the back of the upper teeth and a little bit the gum. Very specific. T. T. People should say it. T, and feel the shape. E, T. Now, if we don't get the tongue to do something, we get the lips to do something. It could be P, E, P, T, P, V. They're getting close. And V, different than B.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get sloppy, then the V becomes B in Spanish, and people change, and then you have 3-4 letters sounding the same. They're not supposed to sound the same. Each letter is supposed to sound different. The Hey, J, the H, J, and G, and X, and so languages and systems change over the years, and then you lose. So at the end, you are creating waveforms, you're creating different physics, state of resonance that creates pathos, and this is where we got lost. And I think Jehovah, Yahweh, Yod He Vav He, if you are religious Jewish person or something, you don't say the name Yahweh. It's blasphemous. Nobody knows how to say it. This is a reference to harmonic series. The unpronounceable name of God, Tetragrammaton, I believe it's the harmonic series. Why it's unpronounceable? No one can pronounce infinite number of frequencies together.
Mm-hmm.
No one,
Only God.
Not most people can pronounce.
Only God can say God's
Only
name.
God, yes, exactly. The logos, again, it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
So here's how diaphonic singing, overtone singing sounds like. And I follow physics to get to it. And I'm going to talk about how I'm producing it. Hopefully people will practice it. I'm picking any note, preferably mid-range note, so that it'll be comfortable for me to sustain it. I'll take a deep breath in. Like this note being, ah, my harmonics are there. You're hearing them as my tone color. Now I'm going to sing it in a way, preserving the fundamental frequency And my tongue, keeping my lower jaw stationary this time, I'm going to create something like vowels by moving my tongue up and down and exploring different ways. When you do that and you move it correctly, you create a condition in physics and acoustics called Helmholtz resonance. Helmholtz resonance means a specific shape of space, size of space can naturally amplify one of the harmonics. Like when you blow in a Coke bottle or any bottle, and if you add water to it, then the pitch goes higher. We've all done that. Or when you have the window next to you as a driver open and someone in the back opens the window and start to go boop, 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 boop. That's Helmholtz resonance. It can manifest in different ways. But you can amplify something that's there. It's there all the time. We can hear it. And that's what the harmonic singing is. And that's why Buddhist monks do it to quiet the mind, to quiet the Maya and go into state of nothingness. They do it in a more guttural way. I can't do it so well, but it sounds like, I'm going to do it in a way that it's comfortable for me, which is the same, which is,
That was beautiful. My turn to try. Let's see if I can do it.
Good. Any note doesn't have to be mine. Beautiful. Your ability on the didgeridoo came handy, and I could hear the didgeridoo start.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Anyone can do it. You just need to be more patient and do it slowly. Don't move through the harmonics very quickly, which means don't start to move the tongue very quickly, very slow first, just to get the hang of it and to know the placement that this tongue has to be in exactly the right place for the right echo chamber to amplify naturally that specific harmonic. If you move too quickly, you're going to miss it.
Yeah.
And it has to be just the right space because it's related to physics. Anyone can do it. Now, how did you feel after having done that? Let's talk about.
Yeah, I mean, this is similar to, in the sound meditation that you offered, you were doing this overtone singing like regularly with the other instruments and things, and it was tuning me to truth, and I was receiving tuning externally, but by creating it, I'm creating my whole body's vibrating in another way. Exactly. So there's an even almost a heightened sense of potency than even just receiving the sound, which is powerful and very important. But when you're generating the sound, and then my whole head started vibrating in that tonality. Exactly. And then so it changed the state of my consciousness. Like I could imagine being in a triggered state of consciousness or something that was like, I'm very frustrated by something. Yeah. Just take a breath to go into that overtone singing. I would imagine that I would emerge from the other side of that chanting with a different state of consciousness.
Exactly. It becomes more powerful if you're producing yourself because you're no longer experiencing the sound from an auditory standpoint, but you're also experiencing through bone and tissue conduction. Uh-huh. That means your skull, your jaws, your lips, your tongue, your cheeks, your neck, your chest, and the rest of your body. But you feel these areas that are close to the source the most. And that's how we experience our voice, through audio and bone and tissue conduction. This is why people, when they listen to their voice on a recording for the first time, like the answering machine, think like, ugh, everybody reacts the same way. That doesn't sound like me. Yeah, dude, that's how people hear you. You don't hear yourself like that. Because you hear yourself at the same time in combination of auditory and bone and tissue conduction. Except here, because it's recorded, is only auditory.
Yes.
So the harmonics are different.
I never thought of it that way. Of course, it makes sense.
You see how reality is created differently, and how acoustics are always they have a hand in there that change the perception, change the way. You keep following that and understanding the constructs around the physics of sound acoustics, you get to God. You get to the logos. You get to different reality. You get to different set of harmonies or different ethos and pathos. Each maqam, again, like the scales. But scales are a reduced version of that, because a D major scale is the same as C major, same as E major, but it's starting on a different note degree. So you're changing the tonal center, the point of departure and arrival key of, when you talk about piano sonata in the key of E flat, by Mozart, by whoever, or piano concerto in the key of G, that G is a tonal center, and you're using notes that are in the scale of E flat, major or minor can be. But in the West, we focus mostly on the major or minor. It's true, we have 3 different minor scales, and they have different constructs, different whole step, half step division between the notes. And we have the harmonic scale, the melodic scale, and the natural minor scales, and we have 1 major scale. We focus on just these 4. There are other scales used. Pentatonic is used quite often, and some other ones, but they get funky if you go into very specialized music or progressive rock or jazz or classical post-romantic music. But this is happening all along. In India, in the Arab world, in Turkey, in Persian world, in North Africa, is that they have different scales. So that a different ethos, different intervallic structure, different group of notes, that the music, instrumental, vocal, or both, is created on that, and you sit and listen, or you become part of a ritual where you're involved, getting the mind out of the way. Your consciousness now is exposed to a variety of different ways of being.
Yeah.
Based on what? Different mathematical ratios, harmony closer to the harmonic series frequencies that are now, you're hearing them, adapting to them in the sound of the didgeridoo, of the gong, you doing overtone singing, or the discs, the bells, the harmoniums, the singing bowls. What you do with that, what you recognize, the work you do in quieting the Maya, quieting the misguided perception, the thoughts, the mental diarrhea we have within us all the time, the story, the rumination, the attachment, bringing harmony to that. This is what we need to do collectively. This is not woo-woo. I've done studies. You look at the word I just gave. Few examples. I'm not taking it as full as I can, I'm limited with time, but this is happening all the time, is being overlooked. I think this is what, if we create rehabilitative system, a healing system, we can use the power of these 2 natural technologies, sound, psychedelics, and the most important thing, the person can bring. Agency. How are you listening to? Are you continuing the story? Are you present? Are you listening to what you're doing? Are you feeling? There are so many elements of this sophistication. It's so abstruse, it's so convoluted, but there's so much richness in actual. So, even more powerful way than doing the overtone singing, and could be even more simple. I just want people to sit and close their lips and hum, just normal humming. And it could be without any movement of the tongue for now. Normal. A very important thing, to close the eyes. And to feel, and bring looseness to the lips, to tap into the vibrational state, because if the lips are too tight or too loose, depending on the inner buccal cavity, they will vibrate differently. And to tap into just that most minimum effort to get the maximum effect, that's a good investment of energy.
Wow. Well, we've gone almost 3 hours now. And this, I think we could go another 12 pretty easily. It's been one of the great treasures of my life to share my home and share the space. And receive actually the harmonics that you carry within you naturally.
We all carry with us.
Yes, but your instrument is particularly well tuned.
Anyone can do that.
And then I appreciate you saying that, because that's the point, is that we can all become the perfectly tuned instrument with our own timbre, as well. And that's the pathway that we're all on. So I think you mentioned it before. You have the website Sound Meditation. Anywhere else people can go?
Yes, and I created and I lead a nonprofit collective, Resonant Mind Collective, created during COVID, to help giving people tools to ground them, to inspire them, tools for integration, for processing, tools that people can use to let go of their attachment to fear. Because it's not just imposed on us. We work with it. We can become deeply interested in something that's not good for us, and we start to invest because of this trauma, because all of this needs to bring awareness to there's something to nurture and nourish. Inner child work is far more important than people think it is, because we are still that child.
Yeah.
It's just we have not given him or her chance to heal, to attend to it, and to be grateful to what we've gone through. Nothing important happens without going there first. And what Jesus says, something that only a child can enter the kingdom of God. What does that mean? What does that pull down to? Not that I'm, devout Christians, but I believe in the teaching of Christ, whether he exists for real or not, whether it's a story or not, but I firmly believe of his existence and the state of harmony.
The state of wonder and awe.
State of wonder, awe, and not telling a story that's unhealthy and being attached to it.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, brother. So much love. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, and thank you for doing incredible things, bringing to the world knowledge, practices, healing, and empowerment.
We're all doing our best. No doubt about it. We love you guys, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.